like timeout people.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm
Yo,
going there to time out people right now.
I'm gonna go there.
give me 1 second, guys. Give me 1 second. Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be actually hosting our live call from Profit with JavaScript inside of YouTube, so you guys can go ahead and get a sneak peek as to what we teach inside the course. But without further ado, I'm going to pretty much drop all the value for our students inside today's lesson. So let's go ahead and meet today's students. Let me go ahead and how do I actually unmute everyone in one go? Mute or allow participants to unmute. Boom. And then everyone, if you want to, there we go. Go ahead and unmute yourself, guys, and say what's up to everyone.
Good guys.
Yo, that's it. What's up, guys?
What's up?
Check
Let's
that.
Blah 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 blah.
we have literally 184 people in this Zoom call right now, which is insane. Okay. Now, I see some messages from Atul saying, "Dear Sonny, it's my first time. I'd like to know what is this Wednesday Zoom." So the agenda for today, guys, is I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone, and you can unmute yourselves if needed. But what I'm going to do now, guys, is pretty much go through today's agenda, so that way we get a rough idea about what we're going to be covering in today's call. Okay. So firstly, I want to say also, oh yeah, so people are saying my voice is resonating. It's because I'm in a different room now, so I'm going to fix that soon. But it's because right now there's a bit of echo in this room, so I apologize for that. But thank you so much, everyone, for the kind birthday messages. I saw so many of them on Instagram. It's insane. I saw so many DMs. Really, really appreciate and love every single one of you. So thank you before we start to every single one of you for that. And yeah, so today we're going to be talking about some high-level stuff. So we're going to be pretty much covering loads of high-level content. So pretty much what is React, I guess, and kind of go into that depth and that detail, answering some of your questions. Any sort of questions that students have, we're going to go ahead and cover that. And then, like the title says, we're going to be covering the Redux today. So I want to do a deep dive on Redux, because Redux is something that in a production environment, Redux is going to be super valuable. Okay, so it's going to be a skill that you guys are going to be able to, if you know Redux, it's going to be something which is going to boost your worth to a company a huge amount. Okay, now with that said, Redux is kind of complicated, so I haven't actually used Redux in quite a while. And now what I'm going to be doing is actually going ahead and show you. So I'm going to be using the React Context API first to go ahead and show you guys how the sort of Redux pattern works. And then I'm going to take it a level up, and I'm pretty much going to show you how to implement Redux. Now, the interesting part about today's call is going to be that because I haven't used Redux in a long time, it's going to be an experience where I will show you, because I've actually forgotten how to implement Redux, which is awesome for you guys because I've used it a ton in the past, but I've forgotten how to implement it, right? So I'm going to show you for exactly how I go about, if I forget something, if I haven't worked on something in a while, my exact sort of mind and workflow and how I'm going to do it. And then hopefully that'll give you guys confidence boost and sort of like that realistic sort of understanding as to how you're going to be doing it when it comes to that practical use case, okay? So let's go ahead and jump in. Firstly, let's go ahead and ask, does anyone have any questions? Because I'm going to take 2 questions before we get started, okay? So
I have one, Sonny.
Go for it, Joe.
So when you say Redux, are we talking PostgreSQL, or are we talking MySQL, SQL Server?
So when we're talking about Redux, no, Redux is actually purely a React thing. So you know how we have the React Context API, so basically inside of a React app, we're going to have to manage our data somehow throughout the app, right? Redux is basically, think of it as the commercial level solution to handling data flow within an application, right? Okay. So without it, I'll explain it and we'll get a very visual breakdown of how we sort of do this stuff. But yeah, it's going to be sort of the professional stuff. So today is actually going to be really important for a lot of you guys, because it's going to help you guys go ahead and sort of level up your understanding from React Context API to Redux. And as far as I'm aware, I think this is the first Redux call or like stream on the channel, right? So this is awesome. And even for the live calls, yeah. So
you're right.
Awesome.
Yes, Sonny, I have a question.
Shoot, dude, go for it.
Yeah, like we did the Amazon clone, and now we have started already with the React.js. So I was reading about the React.js, and there was a part which I read about JSX.
Okay.
So I did not notice anywhere like we have used it, like any syntax or something. So
Yep.
yeah, I wanted to know about that.
Okay. So you're wondering what JSX is.
Right.
Yeah. So JSX is essentially whenever we code in React, right? Notice how in React, so I'm going to go ahead and actually show you an example. So it's a lot easier for you guys to see. I'm going to share my screen as well. So I don't know if you, let me know if you guys can see this. All you need to do, guys, if you can see this, just please go ahead and wave your hand.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Let me go ahead and actually share my, give me 1 sec, guys. God, Zoom. Why do they do this? All right, Zoom upgraded everything and I can't find anything. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 sec.
Yeah, and also a question in the meantime, Sonny. Isn't Redux like made from a different company? Like it's not inside React, like a React Context API is.
Yeah, so good point, actually. So Redux is sort of, think of it as like a community built solution, right? So it was built by the community. Oh, God's sake. How do I close that? Okay. Yeah, it was built by the community. And it's, I'm not sure who built Redux, but to answer your question, the React Context API was built by the guys over at Facebook, and that's why it's pretty much heavily used now. It's kind of getting more and more heavily used. But there is something else. It's not called Relay. I think is it called Relay or Recoil? I think it's called. So if we type in React Recoil, I think is it Recoil or Relay? One of them. Yeah, Recoil. Recoil is another state management library that has come into play. So I'm going to check out this stuff. But right now, the one that's mostly used is the Redux. Sorry, yeah. So Redux. Okay. So with that said, let's go.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sonny.
Redux is basically a framework.
Yeah.
And React is a library. This is the difference.
No. So Redux is a module that you just pull into React, which React is a library, and Redux is just like an npm module that you just pull in. You pretty much go ahead and install Redux into your React project, and then you can use it. Okay, so now JSX, to answer your question earlier, I can't remember who asked the question, but to answer your question,
Arvind.
yeah. Awesome. So to answer your question, in React, we have this return block, okay? We have this nice little return block here. Now, notice how it returns, let's just go to maybe here, for example, okay? So this is basically what gets returned. Now, inside of this return block, you can actually go ahead and have, so let's go ahead and do like here, for example, ignore the if statements and things like that. But here, for example, if we have a return block, David, please man the chat and admit everyone in the waiting room. Yep. So here, if we have a return block, you see these curly brackets. Yeah. So these curly brackets are pretty much going to allow you to have JavaScript code inside of this HTML return. Okay. So basically, think of JSX as like a way of merging HTML and JavaScript together. And that's what we use. That's why you don't have a HTML file and a JavaScript file in React. You just use a JSX file, because it allows you to do both, okay? And then you basically return, you basically go ahead and return the sort of the output that you want, okay? So with that said, and to be honest, this will make a lot of sense when we actually jump into the code. So with that said, what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and just break down some concepts for you guys. So just let me know if you guys can see this.
Excuse me, Sonny.
Yep.
I have a question, Sonny, on the JSX.
Okay.
Like, in past we have created like JavaScript components within the HTML, and we mentioned the file extension as JS.
Yep.
Instead of JSX.
Okay.
It still worked, right? Like.
Yeah. So the reason why it works as JavaScript out of the box is because when you use Create React App, what it's actually doing is you're actually going. It kind of has like. When you use Create React App, it has like a special sort of clever compiler underneath, which changes JavaScript files to JSX. Okay, so some extensions on some tutorials are .jsx. It doesn't matter because honestly, when you're using it, it will be. You don't need to write JSX. Just think of it. When you use Create React App, you can just use .js and it works.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So I know it can get a bit confusing when it kind of overlaps like that, but to answer your question in a nutshell, that's how you do it. Okay. Also, I'm sorry if I didn't admit anyone who just sort of jumped in. Okay. So now what we're going to do is let's go ahead and just dive into some of this. So right now, so imagine you have React, right? So I'm going to go ahead and freeze it. So imagine you got React. Yeah. And now for many of you that don't understand what React is, it's a library. So if you're new to Profit with JavaScript, then React is the library that basically supercharges your apps. Okay, so this allows you to build apps like Netflix, Tinder, Uber, like as in you can pretty much build like any kind of app with React, right? So Frank landed a massive contract with Sonos. Sonos sort of building like a new like sort of radio app and pretty much is using React for that. Now, you can do loads of things with React and it's very, very powerful and it allows you to build something called a progressive web app, okay? So a progressive web app basically, think of a progressive web app as something which is basically has the power of a native app, okay? So it has the power of a native app. So it has the power of a native app, but it runs on the browsers, okay? So it just runs on a browser, which means if it's running on a browser, it means it doesn't matter if it's on iOS, Android, iPhone, tablet, desktop, wherever it is, it's going to be working, okay? So at that point, it really doesn't matter where you're sort of running it, but that's why it's beneficial to use something like React. Now, before you can jump into React, I would recommend you do go ahead and learn the fundamentals. So the fundamentals are essentially just going to be HTML. So HTML, JavaScript. Oops. Oh no. Okay. JavaScript. Don't know why that's there, but you know, anyway, HTML, JavaScript and CSS. Ignore that little bracket. I can't seem to get rid of it. But yeah, so that's pretty much what you need to go ahead and learn just roughly. Okay. So just if you can get a little project working with these three things, right? And you can pretty much get it working to a very minimal scale. So imagine you have a web page with a button click and things like that. At that point, I would say, honestly, just shoot your luck. Just go ahead and try and give React a try. Okay. And now remember, like, there's no condition of, oh, at which point do I make the jump or like, am I ready for it? Like, don't worry about it. Just literally the more, if you start using the React library, it's very, very lightweight, which means you only need to use what you need to basically go ahead and you only use what you need, and it will allow you to it'll build your understanding of this as you're using React. Okay. So I just want to get rid of something. I've got some annoying screen. I use Flux to protect sort of my eyes as it gets later, but I'm going to go ahead and quit it because my screen looks all brown and it's kind of messing me up. Okay, there we go. So now with that said, we have React. Okay, now React is something cool. So it has, I'm going to draw a line here. So let's go ahead and draw a line. So that's basically our intro. Now React it uses something called component-based design. Okay. Now, component-based design is something that you have to become familiar with. Why is it important? Because it allows you to basically go ahead and write a piece of code once and reuse it many times, okay? So what do I mean by this? So imagine I've got a web page. So here's my web page. Let's make it very big, right? So this is my web page. Now, on this web page, okay, imagine it has like a header, okay? So it has a header at the top. And this is where you have like the nav bar and all that sort of stuff. Imagine it has a footer at the bottom, okay? And then imagine you have like a bunch of products. So imagine this is like Amazon or eBay or something, okay? So this is a product, this is a product, and then you've got another product here, okay? Now, on a typical website, what we tend to do is we'll code up we'll sort of add some code for this bit. We'll then add up the same code for this bit, and then we'll sort of copy and paste it and add up for this bit. And we'll just change this sort of into it, like details inside. Now, why is that a bad idea? Because let's say like a designer comes in and says, hey guys, we're going to change all of the design. So all of these product tiles are going to look different. Okay, now I need to go here, here, and here and change everything, which means I don't have to just change one piece of of code. I have to change this one. And then I have to go here and change this one. I have to go here and change this one. And if I forget, or say if I change one thing in this one, so I managed to make it a little bit different, now my code doesn't look the same. So the middle one's going to be different when it shouldn't be like that. Everything should be uniform. Okay. So let's imagine this is called the product component. So imagine this is just called the make it smaller. Imagine this is called the product.js component. Okay, so this is like a product component. Product.js. Oh God, who's that? Let me let me go ahead
Mute
and
everybody. Mute everybody.
yeah. Let me mute the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and let me go ahead. Okay, mute all. There we go. Right now, here imagine we got another one which is product.js. Okay, so we have 3 products now. Why is this so powerful? Because we literally code the product once, right? And then we pretty much reuse this thing. So I can code it once. I have this one file, product.js. Then how do I reuse it? We use something called props. Okay. Oops. Oh wow. Why has that changed? Why is today all of a sudden all my stuff has changed? Okay. But we use this props. Okay. Now props is something like, imagine you pass in props. So you could pass in something like the title, the price, the picture, right? So these are just props. Now, what does prop stands for? It stands for properties. So these are just different properties, and you can pass it into a product, and then it renders out the final product. This is awesome, right? This allows us to pretty much code up our product.js once, and then based on the props that we pass in, we render out the final product, which means that every single time, each one comes out looking the exact same, right? Except with different details. So that means that if a designer comes along and says, hey, we need to update all the products, it's so easy to go ahead and do that, because all we have to do is go ahead and change all we have to do is change this one file, and then everything gets updated accordingly. So that's something to bear in mind. Now, this is the first principle. Okay. So we have props. So number 1 is props. And then basically here, I'm just going to write the 2 principles you must understand in React. Okay, so one is props, and now number 2 is going to be state. Now state is something, imagine it's just like a short-term memory. Okay, so state I refer to as short-term memory, so that's what I like to kind of refer to it as. I just call this the short-term memory of a component. Now, why do I call it short-term? Because if you are to basically go ahead and get rid of if you're going to go ahead and refresh the page, the state will always return to its original value, which means that, say, for example, I have a counter button. Okay, so let's say I had a component here, and let's say this was like let's imagine we've got like at the bottom of a product, right? So imagine at the bottom of a product, I've got like a counter, and inside of this counter, it pretty much says, like it says 0, and then it has a plus and a minus. Okay, so it has a 0, and then it has a plus, and then here it has a minus. Okay, so imagine like I had this sort of ticker thing, right? So basically, if I go ahead and I'm like clicking on this one, so imagine I'm like clicking, so I go ahead and click plus a few times. This will change to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So at the end, afterwards, this will go ahead and be like 4, for example. Now, when I refresh the page, this will go back to 0, because memory state is short term, which means it doesn't persist, which means when we refresh, it goes back to 0. Now, obviously, we want to keep track of this state, but why do we need state? It allows us to do things like this, where basically if I go ahead and click like plus, 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 it will allow us to go ahead and have that functionality. Whereas if I didn't, and also state is isolated. So if I had this in this component, then inside of this component, for example, here, oops. So for example, in here, we would have the same thing. And this one could be a completely different value. So this one could even have like something like 20 in, right? So each component has its own state. So these 2 things are crucial for our understanding of React. So props and state. Okay. Now we need to know this, and we need to sort of like understand props and state very well, because it's going to be crucial in building out an application. So with that said, do we have any questions on this at this point? So either about props or state. So feel free to unmute yourself, and we can pretty much answer any questions anyone has at this point.
Yes, Sonny.
Yeah.
Just one simple question.
Go for it.
So actually the props is almost relates to the object-oriented concept, right? So in JavaScript or in any other different programming language, we have classes, right? So it's almost made. It is made the same way, right?
Yeah. So
Like similar.
think of it like this way. So think of it like, oh, sorry, by the way, I saw that some people say can move the camera, but it's fine. So think of it this way. So yes. So firstly, okay, the reason why I'm hesitant to say yes is because we're trying to move away from class-based components, right? We're trying to move away from class-based components to functional components because functional components are a lot easier to sort of read and understand. Now, your understanding of it is correct. So the reason why it's correct is because class-based components, yes, they have their own kind of memory. So they kind of have this dot. So you have like an instance, so an object. So imagine you had like the product a product class. Then you would say like new product, and you'd pass in some values, and then you'd have that product, right? Now the values inside that product will belong to that object, right? So yes, in that way of thinking about it, it does make sense. The reason why this is kind of a whole nother sort of discussion, and it comes around class-based versus functional. Okay, so like, but the main thing that we need to understand is that every component just has their own state. Okay, so every component has their own state. Now I see some people saying, did you erase everything on the whiteboard? Nope. So if you want to go ahead and you can take a screenshot of this now. Remember that the entire session is going to be recorded, so it will be uploaded afterwards, but feel free to take a screenshot now. Yep.
Yeah, when we talk about state, right, like it's kind of a short-term memory. So is there any kind of a standard practice how much amount of data we should keep? Let's say if we're getting some huge amount of data from API or something. So can we save it in those states for a long time, or is it not recommended? Kind of?
So to answer your question, you're saying, is there a kind of limit to the amount?
Is a size limit or something like this much amount of data?
No. So state, just think of state as variables inside of an object. So it really, at this point, it could be huge, right? Like you could literally pull in an entire database into a variable if you wanted. I'm not saying it's good practice, but you could go ahead and do that, right? You can definitely go ahead and do that. But what I would go ahead and say is, thank you so much, Frank, for dropping a donation on YouTube. Hey. Yeah, so what I would say is pretty much, there is no spacing limit. You can pull in and you could literally put, but what I would say is, if you're considering pulling in an entire database into a component, then you might be wanting to pull it not into the component, but into something like React Context API or Redux. So that way you can pretty much go ahead and save it to like a global state or global store or global value, and then any component can go ahead and access it. But we'll get into that in just a sec. Right?
But if that will happen, then it will make our app more heavier, right? And it is not good.
Yeah. So there's a lot of considerations around like, do you want to have your app, do you want to have your components heavy pulling things in? Every time something changes, should it refetch all the data again? You have to kind of think about all of these things when you're building an app, but try and keep it simple for now, guys. And what my advice to you would be, keep it simple, because it will get to a point where you will have so much, you'll get so many natural questions that will just come up, right? And what I would say is, make sure just build things as you need it, because you're always going to have a curious question. You're always going to have some kind of question as to like, should I do this or should I not do this, or should I do that or should I do this? It kind of becomes a bit kind of like you're going to forever be asking questions as opposed to actually going ahead and coding. I would say just go ahead and code, go ahead and build things as you need it, and then you'll run into those questions and answers naturally, right? Otherwise, even if I told you an answer right now, you'll forget it by the time it comes to actually implementing it. Right. So that,
Sonny, one last question I have.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, like, how do you exactly pass props?
How do you pass props? I will be showing you. I'll show you a light demo very soon as to how we set up props and things like that, because we're going to need to know how to do it. But basically, it's like when you render out so let me go ahead and share the screen. So imagine when you render out a component, you pretty much render it out like this. It'll be product like this. Okay. Now, if you want to pass in the title, it'll be something like this. Let's just call it Amazon Echo or something. Oh, God damn it. Why does it always do that? Amazon Echo, right? So you see what I just did there, right? So,
and one more thing.
Yeah.
So
you
like,
see, you pass it in as an attribute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was watching this DevEd video the other day about state and props, and he said something about props that you can't pass them like from top to bottom or something. I didn't understand that.
Right. Oh, as in you can't pass them. Yeah. So that's what we're going to come to now, right? So I'll explain that in a sec. But yeah, you can pass props down, but you can't pass props up, and that I will explain exactly what we do.
I had no idea about that, so I got confused at that.
No worries at all. I'll explain. Yeah.
Hey, Sonny.
Sonny, I just have a quick question.
Who said it first? Because one question, and then we're moving on.
I did. I started at the before Priyanshu.
Okay, so is that Shrika or Shrika?
Oh, Shrika, go ahead. It's okay.
Yeah, Shrika.
Okay, Shrika, go for it.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So have you ever coded in Python before? Because I was just trying to make a connection to React. So like whenever you import things, is it kind of like how it is in Python? Like you import different modules in order for, or like libraries in order for it to work?
Yes. So it's exactly the same. You pretty much install something. So in Python, you install with pip. In JavaScript, using npm or yarn.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much the same thing. You install a module and you go ahead and use the module. So the same thing, yeah. So that might actually have helped a lot of people out. So that was a good question, yeah. Okay, so now, guys, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So I'm going to allow you to unmute yourselves if you're needed. And then pretty much we can go ahead and jump into the next bit. So we talked about state and props. Okay, so we have our understanding of why this is important, Now, let's go ahead and carry on with that. So, okay, so imagine we've got an app. Okay, so this is like, let's just call it the next Facebook app, right? And it's built with React. Okay, and this is our case study. So this is the one that we're going to be building. Okay, now when you use Create React App, what it does is it builds out.
We couldn't see your screen.
Sorry?
We cannot see your screen.
Oh, okay. Let me go ahead.
Your screen is not shared.
You forgot to screen share.
There we go. Thank you, guys. So you can see it now, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome.
Yep.
So imagine we have the next Facebook app, right? So it's going to be a massive $1 million app, and we're building with the React. Okay. When we use Create React App, what we will see is that we actually go ahead and it will build something called app.js. Now, app.js is simply just like it's a component, right? So it's just you get app.js whenever you use it. Now, app.js, all it does is it will give you a little spinny sort of React icon, okay? So to show you guys what I mean by this, I'm going to literally put it into practice. So I'm going to open up a terminal. I'm going to go full screen on this. I'm going to make this huge so you guys can see it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my desktop. So let me go into desktop. And then I'm going to do npx. So I'm going to do npx create React app. And let me go ahead and do. So here I'm going to say, coach, let's just call that. Oh, why does it keep taking my focus? Let's go ahead and do like demo Redux app. Okay, so basically I'll explain what this is. So npx is basically a node package. I think of it as node package executor, right? And what it does, it goes to the node like registry on the internet, and it will basically go ahead and get the latest Create React app, which is something which the guys over at Facebook created to allow us to. We can use this, and it will go ahead and build the like a template starting React app for us, right? And then here we put the name of the app in. So we're going to do demo Redux app. So if I hit enter, what it should do is it starts to create the React app. Okay, so we can pretty much leave that running. And once this goes ahead and starts, we'll come back to it. So while this is running, this will create something called app.js. So this was like one component. And then what we can do is, imagine on Facebook, you have loads of things on Facebook, right? You have like a feed. So you have a header, you have a feed. So let's go ahead and build some components. So here, imagine we've got like a header component. So imagine we build a header component. So here we're just going to say header.js. And how do I make this a rainbow again? I like it when it does when it changes the color itself.
There's
There we
like a
go.
little circle
Yeah,
thing.
that's it.
And
Found
then,
it.
yeah.
There we go. Thank you. It's just more colorful for you guys to see. Then imagine you've got header.js, and then imagine we create a feed. So like here we got a feed. So this would be like feed.js, and then imagine we had another one. So and this could be like let's just say okay. And then imagine we have a bunch of posts, right? So post, like imagine you've got a post.js because like on Facebook you've got a feed, and then you've got a bunch of posts. Okay, so why is it like a tree? Because in app.js we'll render the feed and we'll render the header, and that'll create a page. So you have a header at the top of the page. So you'll have a header at the top of the page, and then you have your feed, and then inside your feed you might have a post, right? So you might have like a post. You might not be able to see that very clearly, so I'll use this one. You have a post. Now you might not just have one post, you have several posts. Okay, so you're going to have like a few different posts. So we pretty much can reuse the same component. So post.js. Okay. Now, so this one we also render out several posts. Now, what happens is so this is actually goes to Priyanshu's question. So app.js, imagine we had, right? So think of it this way. So imagine we had another component called login, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create a component over here. This one's called the login.js component. And the purpose of this one is to basically, the only purpose of this is going to be a login screen. Okay. So just think of this as like levels, just to make it very simple for now. Think of this as level 0, level 1, and level 2. Okay. Now, at level 0, we have the app. At level 1, we start rendering the page. So you can pretty much put things like the header, the feed, login. And imagine the user goes to log in. And then once you've logged in, I get the user object at this point. So now I have the user, the object. Right? So imagine like I log in and I've successfully got the user's object. Okay, that's cool. But I need the user object when I'm at post, when I'm over here. So I kind of need the user over here. But I get the user object over here. So how the hell do I get my user over here? Right? So what we could do is we could have a piece of state here called user. And basically in React, you can pass your user. So this by default would be no. You can pass the user and the sort of, there's something called a set user, right? So inside of React, you'll have something like this where you've got a hook and then it'll say use state, right? And then by default, you could have no as the value. So this means inside of React, you have a user where the default value is no, okay? And what you can do is you can actually pass set user down to login.js. And what this does, and you can pass that down as a prop. So you can pass like props down. So if I need the user down here, I can pass it through here. And then from feed to post, I can pass it through here. And then this is how the user will get here, right? Now I can also, so Priyanshu, you asked about it's one direction, right? It's only one direction that you can go in. Now that's because imagine we have the user up here, right? I can pass set user down here. And then basically when they log in, I can say set the user to this, which means that this user gets updated. Okay. So I can do that. So which means that in some sense, I can kind of go back up the tree, but it's not a good practice to do it like that. Right. Which means that the user gets.
So there's one question while you were asking or telling about this.
Yeah.
So how do I exactly know which is the topmost component and which is the bottommost component?
I'll show you in just a sec once the app gets running. Yeah. But so think of it, this is app.js is going to be your topmost component in the start. We have the login.js, and then basically the user is here, right? Now, what we need to do is we kind of need to set the user. So we kind of, then at this point, this gets populated. And then we need to, if I need the user over here, I need to pass it over here, and I need to pass it down here, and I need to also pass it over this one. And imagine if I had another component over here. For example, let's say we had a component called, let's just call it a video post, right? So imagine we got like a video post component. So this one, what I'm going to then need to do is pass it over here because I need the user. So I need to go ahead and pass it over here. Now you can already see there's so much passing around, right? There's just endless arrows, okay? And this is what we call this a problem, right? As soon as you see this, it screams something called prop drilling. Oops.
Can I ask something? I want to say something.
Yeah, go for it.
You know, like the amazing part of it is last night I just finished developing Facebook clone with you, you know, following your YouTube, what's the name? You know, the YouTube video you made.
Yep.
And I understood nothing about this, reducer and all that. I just copied the code and it worked.
Right.
And now I'm getting the understanding. Thank you very much.
Awesome, man. I love that, dude. Thank you so much. I can't see anyone right now, but what was your name? Who was that said that?
Abdul. I'm here, man.
Abdul.
Yeah.
Awesome, Abdul. That's amazing, man. Honestly, that's awesome to hear that, dude. And I'm really, really glad that helped you understand. So, because yeah, like you see, we have this kind of tree and we call this prop drilling because you're like, I kind of need to pass the user down and then down here and then down here. And basically this leads to code which is coupled, right? Now, what does coupled mean? It means that like, if I change something over here, I should be confident that I don't break something over here. But in this case, with all these like connected arrows, yes, the app might work, but it might break if I change something over here. If I change feed.js so that it no longer passes the user in, so imagine if it no longer does this and it no longer does this, then I'm kind of screwed because I'm like, oh God, the user just broke, which means that this component doesn't render the user anymore, right? So how do we get past all of this headache? Okay, so before we kind of solve this, I'm going to show you guys the actual app itself. So let's go ahead and do cd demo Redux app. So now I'm inside of the component, and then here I'm going to go ahead and do code. So it's a little neat trick. So you can say code inside. If for you guys, it'll be code dot, but mine's going to be code. And keeps taking the focus away from my mouse. It's really annoying. Okay. And this opens up VS Code. Now, what I'm going to do is also, if you're in the waiting room, sorry guys, I'm going to actually give Joe, do you want to be a co-host?
Sure.
Yep. Awesome. I'm going to make you a co-host. Nice. Okay. So now,
Sonny, I just have a question.
Go for it.
What's this code dot for?
Right. So I'll show you first how to install it and then I'll explain it. So here you want to do Command Shift P, and you see if you type in shell command, it'll say, I'm using the beta version of VS Code, so I get like the additional features and stuff. But in your one, it'll say install code command in path, right? So you want to do Command Shift P to get that up. So Command Shift P shell, and then you should see install code command. Now the reason why this is really useful is because remember when I went back here to this bit, right? For you guys, all you're gonna have to do is, so imagine like I'm inside of the right directory. If I just do code dot, right, what it will do is it opens up. So imagine I'm going to show you guys again. So code insiders dot, but for you lot it will be code dot. And then what that did is it opened up VS Code with the files and everything on my left. You see that?
Sounds good.
All right. So it's a very quick start to go ahead and open up VS Code, right?
Perfect.
Also, we crazy enough have 500,000 people watching on YouTube right now and Facebook. So guys, smash the thumbs up if you're enjoying that. That's dope.
That means there's 700 people.
Yeah, there's like 700 people watching this right now. That's awesome. Okay, so right now, what we're gonna do is we've got source. So here, so this is the app that you're gonna get. So if you hit Command J, pull it up like this, then you should get the little terminal pop up here. And I'm gonna go ahead and move myself for you guys. So we've got Command J, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna have. I'm gonna make this super big for you guys. You guys can still see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. So npm start, and then it will go ahead and spin up the app. So give this a second. Also, while this is doing this, so you see it will pop up a localhost 3000. Give this just a sec, and then let me go ahead and check our chat to see if there's any chat come through. So we see prompts. Okay, awesome. Right, now you get this spinning thing. So if you get this, like, awesome job, right? You already made some progress and you're in the right direction. Okay. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to our code. So here, and we're going to go ahead and delete a few files. We're going to delete app.test.csv. app.js. So boom, it's gone. Logo.svg, sorry, boom, gone. Setup tests, boom, gone. And then app.js is what started off. So app.js is this point. So remember, Priyanshu, you were asking, how do we know the tree, right? So this is where we start. It's called app.js here. So this is where the app kind of gets rendered. Now, I'm not going to go into detail as to like where things get sort of pop, like where things, how it all works and stuff like that. You can read the React docs for that. But at this point, this is where the app sort of starts off. So to get started, we're going to go into header, go ahead and do H1. I'm going to say, this is my fancy Facebook app. Okay. Hashtag fancy dinner. Hey, save. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and change this to a lowercase a, right? And then I'm going to, because we like to follow something called the BEM convention, BEM naming convention. Let's go to app.css, just delete everything, right? Save it all. Index.css, go here, and basically you get this like annoying hidden space. So just go here and add this one line of code. So it basically just defeats all the margins that are by default given. You don't really want by default margins applied to your stuff. So that'll get rid of it. So then we go there, go back to app.js, save it. And then we go back to our code over here. And now, oops, here we go. Now we should be able to see if we need to get rid of the logo, save it, go back to our code. This is my fancy Facebook app, hashtag fancy dinner. Hey, right? Now everything's pretty good. It's working. So Priyanshu, to answer your question, here we had app.js. So the next layer, header, feed, login, they would go here. So imagine you had like login, you had header, you had...
Oh, now I'm starting to get it. Now I'm getting the tree.
Yeah.
Like, so if this is like this, so the inside of the login will be like, say I'm passing a prop inside of the login component, like inside of the login file. So the prop that will be passed inside of the login file will be below login, right?
Yeah, so it would be, so we're not doing page routing today, right? So one thing to bear in mind, right now, imagine we only have like one page on the website. If you want to have multiple pages, use something called React Router. And if you do the clones, you'll be able to see how we use this.
I know about it. I know about it.
Okay, awesome. So in this case, imagine the login, right? So if we wanted to have, like, imagine we dived into the login component and then inside so imagine, just pretend I'm inside the login component here, I'm nested in, and then you'd have some kind of like, I don't know, user, I don't know. I wouldn't really have a user input. I'd just have an input. But the point is that inside of here, I might collect the user, right? So what we might do is have a user variable at the top here. And then we sort of prepare it with use state. So we can go ahead and do use state. I'm going to auto import it, and I'm going to do no. Okay. So now we have the user here. Now what you're going to see is I'm going to pass the user in at this point. And obviously this wouldn't work because I don't have these components built. It's going to freak out. But if I just do this, so imagine I needed the user, all of these different things, right? Now already, when something starts to feel wrong, right, it's probably wrong. Trust me when I say that. When something starts to feel like, it's like, this doesn't feel right, it feels like messy, then chances are it's probably wrong, okay? So like at this point, you're like, okay, why am I passing it in 3 times? I feel like I could do something a little bit better, right? So at this point, what you could do is introduce something like the React Context API or Redux. Now in this case, if we did this, like imagine, so we had the video post and post.js. So imagine we had the feed and inside the feed. So I'm just going to pretend this is inside of feed. Okay. I know it's not a good example, but it's just so we can see it in one page. So imagine I had post, like the post itself. So post, and then imagine you had another one and you had a bunch of other ones. So they're inside a post. That means you're going to have to drill the user inside of there as well. So you're going to have to you're going to have to pass the user from this component inside, and then you see your user just gets thrown around your app and it looks horrible. So this isn't good coding, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and basically change our structure. So rather than doing this prop drilling, right, we don't want this. So we're going to go ahead and cut all this crap out. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of all of this. Don't want any of this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, completely get rid of it. And this will make life a little bit easier. So now, boom, okay. So what we're going to do now is instead, imagine like we basically kind of add a wrapper around the app. So imagine like I'm kind of like wrapping the entire app with like a global state, right? So imagine like we wrap it in something like this. So, oops, let me go ahead and put it here. So imagine we've got this and we've got like a global state, right? Now, what lives inside the global state? Imagine it's just like global variables, right? So an example of a global variable could be the user, right? That means, think of it this way now. So obviously we still have this renders this, this renders this, this renders this, and then this might render these things. This one might render this. Oh no, I mean a video is not going to render here, but the feed could render video post or normal post, okay? Now imagine inside of the login.js, we get the user's data, yeah? So what we can do at this point is imagine, let me just go ahead and write the user over here for a sec. And I'm going to cut this one. So imagine the user's inside of our global state, right? Now what I can do is when the user logs in, I can push the user. Oops. So much multitasking. It's insane when we do this. All right. So I can push the user into the global state, right? So now the user is sitting inside of a global sort of wrapper. Think of it that way. Yeah. Now, what's awesome about this is I need the user over here. So all I can do is I can just pretty much grab it from the global state and use it inside of post.js. Yeah. So you see like how simple that is. So rather than having all those extra additional arrows, now if I need it inside of video.post, I can pretty much go ahead and do that as well. So I can do the same thing, right? I can go ahead and do, is it just me? Oh, the lights are changing. Yeah. So I can go ahead and do video post.js now. Okay. So you see it's very, very slick in how we do this, right? So, and then say if I need it inside of the header.js, I can do the same thing. I can pretty much go ahead and just pop it in there, right? So the user can be pretty much, we can push anything into the global state and we can use it anywhere in the app. So this completely eradicates the prop drilling problem, right? Now, there's two global state libraries that we're going to talk about. One is the most famous Redux, right? So Redux is something that we've probably heard of. If you haven't, you will hear about it at some point. Redux is like think of it as the pro sort of solution, right? So it's kind of like the one that they use mostly in production, right? They're going to use that in production, and they're going to use that in production, and then you've got the React Context API. Right, so the React Context API. Now, this one is the sort of easy one to implement. So you've got two different libraries here, Redux and you've got React Context API. Now, don't think that just because it's easier, it's not as powerful. The React Context API is extremely powerful, right? So it's a very, very simple pattern, but it's very, very once you understand the React Context API, it allows you to use this global state mechanism and still have everything working as you need it. And Redux, however, is a lot more difficult to implement, but it uses the same pattern. But it's very powerful, which is why we use it in industry, why loads of companies use Redux. Now, what should you do? My advice is you learn React Context API, use it in all of your side projects and everything, because the pattern that you use in the React Context API is the same pattern that you end up using in Redux. So if you learn it in the React Context API in basically the easy way, then pretty much you hack the system and you kind of shortcut the sort of learning curve, and learning Redux is a breeze. So that's my advice. And we're going to do that today. And I'm going to show you guys how we go ahead and implement this. So I'm going to create a very, very simple experience here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and create a login.js. So I'm going to go ahead and do login.js. And here I'm going to do RFCE, boom, like this. And RFCE, so this is my login component. So here I'm going to say I am the login component. Okay. And imagine in here, we just have a button, and this button just says login. And I'm going to really exaggerate this example for a sec, guys. Yeah. Oh, see you later, Patch. Awesome, dude. He's got to run.
I'll chat with you tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, cool stuff, dude. Oh yeah, we're gonna be doing a session tomorrow. So
Yeah.
cool.
Cool, man.
Yep. See you then, bro. Nice.
All right, brother.
So now we have the login component. Patch does one-on-one sessions with me. That's what he was talking about as well. If anyone wants to do that, just give me a shout, and we can arrange something. So login. So now we have the login component. Now we're gonna keep it so simple. I'm not even gonna have an input for. I'm just gonna kind of fake the login, right? So imagine when you log in, it fires off a function. So here we have onClick. Let me go ahead and admit. So we have an onClick, and then imagine this fires off a login to app function. So we need to create that function up here. So I'm going to go ahead and say const login to app. This is an arrow function, and then here basically do. I hate the new Zoom update. Honestly, if the Zoom team are watching this, you guys always ruin stuff. So don't keep touching it. Do some login stuff because oh god, it's so annoying. Okay, so login to app. Now here we do some login stuff, right? So in app.js, I'm going to show you guys the first way, which is the bad way. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and explain it and show how we refactor it. I think that'll be the most easy way for you guys to understand. Okay, so user set user. What we're going to do now is I'm going to pass through the set user, right? So I'm going to pass through set user. So this is the modifier function, which allows us to change the user. So here I'm going to pass through that modifier here, right? So if I go into my login, and also right now it's not imported. So little cool trick, if you press Control Spacebar, you get this pop up, auto import, boom, I got the import. Now I am the login component shows up, okay? So I saw a comment from Delete B saying React Context API is easy, but some companies are needing Redux. Yes, but my advice to you guys is learn the React Context API first, and then picking up Redux is a breeze. So it's a little trick. Trust me, do it that way because I remember when I was learning, I didn't even, and this is a little story for you guys. I didn't even know Redux when I first landed my first job. I literally landed the job and I was like, I used something called Flux, which is kind of similar, right? And then I said like, but listen, like I'm willing to learn this, right? I'm really willing to learn this. And then what I did is, honestly, I kid you not, for the entire first week of my job, I pretty much went into work and I literally downloaded a Redux tutorial on off YouTube. And I literally watched the tutorial on the train to work every day. And then I pretty much just went with it. And I went with it. I failed a bunch of times and eventually I just got it, right? Corey says, Sonny, you literally have helped me gain years back with all these hacks. Honestly, the little hacks really, and I appreciate that, dude. The little hacks really do make such a difference, right? They really do make such a difference and they do save you a lot of time. So here we have the login component, right? Now, what I'm going to say now is imagine the user, right? So here on the app.js, so at this top level, right? I'm going to have, this is the fancy Facebook app. You are logged. I'm just going to say you might be logged in, right? You might be logged in. Oh, actually, no, I'll show you guys the proper way. We'll do some JSX and I'm going to say if there is a user. Oh man, see, it keeps taking my focus. If you are a user, then we're going to say I'm going to use backticks. Say the user logged in is, and then I'll render the user. Otherwise, if there is no user, so this is something called a ternary, then go ahead and do the following. So we're going to say backticks. We're going to say, I don't really need a backtick. Say no user is logged in. Okay, save it, backtick there, boom. Right, so now if we go to our app, it says no user is logged in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. So it says no user is logged in right now. So, but when I click login, so Priyanshu asked earlier, where do I pass in the props? So whenever you create a function, the props come through as an argument here, right? So,
all right.
Yeah, so here I passed something in as set user. The name was set user. So here, to access it, all I need to do is say props.
You have to say like props.setUser.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can do the ES6 standard and you kind of like destructure here and you just get the set user out of it. So this means that you're kind of breaking apart the object at this point and you don't, so now I don't.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so you could just do that. That's like something which is kind of cool. You can definitely go ahead and do that. Yeah. But the reason why when I'm teaching it, the reason why I don't like to do it is because those people who don't know destructuring may not know what I'm talking about. So that's why I do this. Right. So imagine when we click the login to app button, I do props.setUser, and then here I say, let's just say Sonny. Okay. Or I'm going to do a little clout shout out. Go ahead and follow my Instagram. Okay. So SSSSanga. There we go. So you got that, right? So now when I log in, it should, this is the theory right now. Okay. We're going to go ahead and we pass in set user. And then when I click login, it should go ahead and set the user to Sanga. And then it will basically go ahead and it should now re-render and say the user logged in is Sanga. Okay, so go back. And if I go back, refresh, then I'm going to click login. Okay, the user logged in is Sanga. Okay, which is awesome.
If we're not, if we're destructuring it,
yeah,
it would just be set user and then parentheses and then like whatever you want to put in it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Somebody else was about to ask a question. What was that one?
No, it's not a question. I just ask, what is your full name?
Oh, Sergeant Sonny Singh Sanga. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, dope.
Sonny, can you please explain the condition again?
Yeah, so I'll explain this condition.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so this is something we called a ternary, right? So here, user is basically, so here we're saying if the user exists, so yeah, so if this user exists, then we're basically going to go ahead and say the user logged in is this. So basically, this is like this can be any kind of Boolean, right? So if this is true, it will go here, and if it's false, it will go here.
Okay.
Right now, if you're not familiar with ternary, God, I keep calling it tertiary. Thank you, Leaf, for explaining that. But yeah, I always forget that. I always call it ternary, tertiary, whatever it is, but ternary operator, yeah. And this is really handy in JSX. So this will make your stuff really clean and very concise. So that's going to help you out a lot. So
so Sonny, the JavaScript version of that would be if user blah blah.
Exactly.
Then the user logged in is blah blah.
Yeah. So literally you have this.
This is a compressed notation.
Exactly. You'll have something like this. God damn it.
It's like a conditional clause, simple way in one sentence conditional clause.
Yeah, try not to use the word class. The reason being is because class can get thrown around in React and it kind of throws everyone around.
You said clause, not class.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, clause, yeah.
I mean, we cannot use if statement in the JSX, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in JSX, you can't use this, which is why you use ternary. Plus, I mean, like, look at the chunk of this compared to this. Like, it's very clean. So try and get used to that. But yeah, that's a good question. So now, guys, what I'm going to show you. So the reason why that works.
Sonny, quick question.
Yep.
In the JSX, can you do multiple levels of ternaries? Like if this, then another, instead of true, add another condition.
So you can.
Can you go level down? How many levels down can you go?
You can. So imagine like if there's a user, if there's a user and the user is equal to Sanga, then you see it can get a bit messy now though. So
okay.
So then you can say that, okay, Sonny is logged in. Yeah. Else, someone else is logged in. Else, no user is logged in. Right? So
it can get confusing.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So if I logged in, Sonny is logged in. You see that?
I can't see your board, that whiteboard.
No, I wasn't doing the whiteboard. I was just showing this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
At this moment, we can use parentheses.
Thinking of cases where we would even need this, like.
Yeah, I mean, if you
would even need to nest this.
You might need to, but don't. Yeah, don't do it. Like honestly, I wouldn't say. I would just try
Like
and
there
say.
might be some other ways to do that.
Yeah, and to be honest, if you find yourself doing that, remember your code should be somewhat of like very very easy to maintain and sort of, you know, like read. And if you do that, it kind of becomes like, you know, like it gets so nested and messy. It kind of gets a bit annoying to read. So I would avoid doing that. But now we've got the set user, so that's how. So I hope that made sense for you guys. So now when we use set user, we're basically that was the first way, right? That was the first way of doing it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement the React Context API very quickly. I'm not going to jump too far into it, but because I just want to show you guys the sort of a quick breakdown of how to do it. So, and this is my advice to you. I never remember off the top of my head the files that I need to do. Okay, I literally I do it once, and then I just fall back to an old file. So literally right now, I'm going to go ahead and say open. I'm going to say clone. Which clone have I got on my computer? I've got so many clones. Let's go ahead and go open up the Amazon clone. Okay, so boom, I'm going to open up the Amazon clone, and then here in the Amazon clone, I'm going to go down, and I'm basically just going to go ahead and drag some code into my workspace, go add folder to workspace. And now what I'm going to do is, rather than remembering every time, I just go ahead. I know I need this file. I need state provider. So I'm going to go ahead, copy the state provider.js here, right? So this, again, all you need to do, I'll explain this in a sec, but you need the state provider. I need a reducer. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a reducer.js. I'm going to paste it inside. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab an index.js. So you see here, we need to wrap our components. So I need to go inside of index.js. And basically, I'm going to go into my index.js and just wrap it.
Could be from Amazon clone, right?
Yeah, so this is just from the Amazon clone. But honestly, like all you need to do is you don't need to stress about like, oh man, didn't actually catch what he did there. But I'll quickly show you guys why I did. And look, honestly, this is... let me go ahead and... God, some people are super annoying on YouTube. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to pretty much remove this file. Actually, I'll keep it in there for now, a little bit. But the point is so a few changes happened here. We got one, and we've got state provider.js. Now, this one is basically preparing the data layer. So this global state, okay? This is basically preparing the global state. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and here we do a bunch of imports. And then here we say export const state context equals create context, right? So here what we're doing is this is basically preparing the context. So this one, and the context in this case, just think of it as the global state, okay? Then this is basically what allows us to wrap app.js, see, inside of index here. So this is basically, so literally think of it as this wrapper is the state provider. See that? Because it's literally providing the state, the global state to the app. So it literally wraps it, right? So I hope that makes sense, like, because it's literally just sitting around it, right? Now this takes two things. It takes an initial state and something called a reducer. Now, if I go inside of the reducer, so here, I'm going to simplify this code because we don't need any of this right now. So I don't need this. I don't need any of this. All I need is that, okay? And now this is an example of a reducer. Now, what the hell is a reducer, right? So like if we have, a reducer is something where, remember when I said we push something from, so imagine we're inside the login.js component and we log in and then we push the user into the global store, right? So in order to push the user into the global store, we use something called, we dispatch like an action, right? So in this case, I would dispatch like something like a set user action, right? And this would basically just contain an object which basically has the user inside of it, right? So imagine this kind of is like a message. Well, so you're basically sending like a message to the data, like this global state saying, hey, go ahead and set the user. And this is the user I want you to set it to. And then what happens is the reducer, imagine like there's this magical thing called the reducer, which basically just sits on the data layer. So think of it that way. It literally just sits on the data layer. right? So I'm going to use a different color because that's a bit confusing. But imagine we had like this, and let's go ahead and do reducer. So you guys can see over here, okay? So we have the reducer. Now this reducer is just always listening. So imagine like it's just listening around the entire data layer. And then here it says, whoa, 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 I just got a message saying to set the user. And this is what I'm setting it to. So inside the reducer, here we have a switch, which is basically saying set the user. So here it's saying return, and it's basically saying return whatever the original state looked like. So remember, like this is the global state. So this is called a spread operator. I'm not going to dive too much into a spread, but basically you want to make sure that you keep whatever the state currently was. And then we're going to just change the user. And then remember, it passed an action, which is this thing. And then action.user allows us to get this thing, this little message, right? So now what we're saying is, okay, we push the message and it pretty much goes ahead and changes the user. And then if it doesn't, say for example, I passed in a message like update user to someone, then we don't have that listen. Nothing's listening to it here. So by default, we just return the original state. It doesn't break anything, right? Now, thank you as well, because I saw loads of people said they liked that explanation inside of YouTube. So that's awesome. Okay, so now,
Just a quick question.
Go for it.
So how do you know which is local state and which is global state inside your code editor? I can't differentiate between a global and a local one.
Okay, so I'll show you. The way to look at it is, imagine we're inside of app.js, right? Here. Mm-hmm. This is like, you can see this is local state because I'm literally declaring it here, the variables here, and this is being used here. Yeah. Now, the way I would pull it from the global state, so imagine I've got my reducer, the store, the initial state is this, right? The user. And then if I go ahead and I've got a snippet of code somewhere here, I think it's this one, yep.
Oh, okay. So if it's outside a function, like then it's global.
No, I'll show you how it works now. So back to our code. So forget the Amazon code for now. So so I can pull the user from our local state here, right? So by default, this is pretty much where I define it, where I use it, everything like that. Now here, if I want to pull it from the global state, I basically need to say this, right? So this is how we do it. So you say const, and then you basically get two things. So let's just comment out the local one. We basically get the state, and then we get this special thing called dispatch, right?
Okay.
So we get state and then something called dispatch. Now, here we have use state value. So I need to import this, and this is from the state provider, so that file that we created earlier, this one here, right? Mm-hmm. And what this is doing is it's basically going ahead and it gives you two things. It gives you the global state and it gives you dispatch. Now, if I want to get it from here, I can say state.user, right? Okay. And then this will basically go ahead and say state.user. So now it's getting it from the global state.
Okay.
Okay.
I kind of get it, yeah.
Yeah. But remember, you can do ES6. You can also break it down like this. Priyanshu loves that. So you can pretty much go ahead and do this and then boom. Yeah. But you see,
I love
Sonny,
it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Sonny, you named in one of your clones, you named the file state provider, you named it data layer.
Yeah, because I was trying to test if it was easier for you guys to understand with data layer. Because basically, essentially, just think of this. This is the state provider, right? It's kind of like this thing. But think of it also as the data layer. That's how I kind of explain it. And you can get more complicated. You can have different layers of the data layer. And then in Redux, you call that slices of state. So you can have different reducers and stuff like that. But we're not going to get into it.
That's why I asked it, because I wanted to ask you what's the standard like? Which would be better to use?
So right now, I would just use state provider. Again, it doesn't matter too much at this point. Just learn the pattern, right?
Sonny, I have a question.
Yep.
I think the reducer acts as a switch between the data layer and the components. Is that right?
Yeah. So imagine this is the reducer, right? Yeah. So it has a switch inside of it because it's listening to different actions, right? It's trying to like say, hey, like what kind of action came in, right? So what kind of action came in. And then think of it in a way that, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up a diagram quickly because I think this might actually help us out. So let's go ahead and type in Redux or something like that. Right. So Redux has the exact same pattern as the sort of, so let's go ahead and go here. I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger. So I would highly recommend that you all go ahead and read some stuff about like Redux and stuff like that. So, okay, so here. So imagine now I've got, so this is React and Redux. Okay, so imagine this is the same as React Context API. So we have the view, this is the component. Okay, the subscribe, all that's saying is essentially, just like we have here, this is subscribing basically. We're just pulling the user, right? So imagine when we had the old one, so it's a state. Here we're basically subscribing, that's that. The dispatch, I haven't showed you guys an exact use case, but I'll show you right now. So what we can do is I can copy this line of code, go into login. Rather than doing this set user crap, like this rubbish, I don't want to pass this through every time. Yeah, I want it to be clean. I don't want to have like things pass through and all that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead, pull in this magic line of code here. And the reason why I call this magic is because honestly, once you get used to doing this, it becomes very simple to go ahead and it gets very simple to go ahead and reuse it, right? So this gives you the state and this dispatch. Dispatch is like a gun that allows you to basically shoot actions into the data layer. So remember I showed you guys here, so where we shoot the action into the data layer, right? So here, what I can do now is rather than props.setUser, I can do dispatch, and I basically just pass an object into dispatch, and I basically say the type is, remember inside the reducer, we had set user. So the type is a set user type of action, and I'm passing a user in, and in this case, I'm going to make the user Sanga, right? So now I've dispatched when I click the login button. Then that gets picked up inside the reducer. So when I click the login button, it's going to dispatch this action that gets picked up inside the reducer, and then it goes and manipulates a store. So here, remember the store or state, doesn't really matter, store or state, right? So now you've got the state, and then here it will go ahead and basically change the user, okay? So it changes the user. Now, this then, because we're subscribed, it will actually update and re-render. So now, just give me 1 sec. So now here, what I can do is, because we're mapped to the state here, now everything, if we've done it correctly, should be working. So let's go here. It says state provider is not defined on index.js. So here I need to go ahead and import state provider. So I'm just going to say import state provider from state provider. There you go. And then go back, refresh. State provider does not contain a default. Oh, okay. We need to do explicit. And there we go. Okay. So this is my fancy Facebook app. Hashtag fancy dinner. I'm the login component. Login. Oh, something happened. Right? Let's check out what happened. So what I do is when I debug this, I'll show you guys. I'm going to open up my inspector. And I'm going to click the console, and nothing seemed to happen, right? It just kind of disappeared. So the first thing to debug, right? What I like to is I like to go to reducer.js, and inside here, I like to do console.log, and I always log out my action. So this shows me, did this action actually get fired off? This one right here, right? So let's check it out. So I'm going to go ahead and click login. Okay. So it actually fired off the action. Type was set user. The user was SSSSanger. Okay. So what I can do now is I can go ahead, go back to my code, check it out. Let's say, okay, action.user, cool. Yep, this is cool. And then I can go back to my app, and here it says state.user. So really, I mean, at this point, oh, okay. So remember this one, we didn't actually change it. So we had that double tertiary, and that's again a bad reason, another reason why you shouldn't do that. So here I'm going to say logged in as state.user. So save. Let's go back. And now refresh. Login. Oh, nice. So you see, it just flew through the entire cycle there. Okay. So literally the entire Redux cycle, this entire cycle just processed, and then it re-rendered. So here, logged in as and to prove that I'm not lying to you guys, if I go into login.js and I type in like, let's just say like Priyanshu. So let's say like he's about to log in. So now if I go and refresh and I go, boom, logged in as Priyanshu. Right, so it dispatched the action, set user, Priyanshu. I hope I spelled it right. And then, yeah, and there you go. Yeah, so you see, like this whole cycle works really, really nice. Okay. And
Yeah, so this action dot user you have written, right?
what was that?
So this user, the action dot user, when
Yeah.
you are reading it.
Yeah.
So this user is so this name has to match with what we are passing.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So you see what he's saying here, guys. You see, I passed in an action, and then here was user, right? Sorry, in login, I dispatched the type and then a user, and then here you have to match action.user to that exact same key. So if I change this to like username, then this in the reducer would have to be action.username. Even if I mapped it to user, the action dot would have to be the same. So you want to keep it consistent to be simple. Okay. Right. Now, this is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, just one quick question. I've worked with Flux in the past, so there we used to have lots of stores, right?
Yeah.
But in Redux, as you showed the diagram, we had only one store. So is it like in Redux we only have one store? Is that the limitation or something that is prerequisite?
So good question. To answer it, the first thing is I also learned Flux. So if you are doing Flux, it's going to be really kind of easy for you to move across. To answer your question though, this is the React Context API being used in a Redux-like fashion. We are going to be covering Redux. I see so many people asking about it in chats, yes, but we are going to be covering it now. So this is the React Context API. Okay, and also Jose says, is it Redux hooks? Anything with hooks is not Redux, it's React. Hooks is React. But yeah, so now to answer your question, inside of the React Context API, you can have multiple stores, but in this case, I've only used one, and I'll sort of maybe might not teach that just yet. But in Redux, you can actually have, the practice is to break it up into multiple stores, yes. So you would have like the user store, the basket store, the products. I mean, it depends how granular you want to get, but to answer your question, the practice is, yes, to split your code up into different stores.
Okay, thanks.
So, Sonny, you just went through the Redux flow, right? You just demonstrated the Redux pattern between, no, this one right there.
Yep.
Didn't you just demonstrate this? So is there anything more to Redux than this? I mean, where does the integration with PostgreSQL or SQL, is that downstream, upstream?
So let's just completely forget about Postgres and SQL and stuff, because that's a whole different department as such. To do that, you need to start doing requests, and that kind of is completely separate from what we're doing here. So try and think of it separate to that. But yes, we kind of ran through the same pattern that Redux uses. But right now, what we're going to be doing, thank you so much, Calvin Kabanda, by the way, $5 donation. He goes, I'm a simple man. I see a live session for Sonny. I click. I appreciate all the value you keep giving us, feeling more comfortable. Thank you so much, dude. But yeah, what I was going to say is, Joe, to answer your question, in Redux, you have things like middlewares, right? So imagine every time you went through this flow, right? So imagine you went through this flow, you can have something middlewares. And for example, you can have a middleware. I can't remember which point it is. I think it might be like here or here. But basically, you can have an action that dispatches every time. The middleware could be a simple thing. It could be like logging out every action. And it can also be something which is super like sort of technical, like check if the user's logged in every time this cycle runs.
But that could be a separate, like a Node.js kind of an interaction, separate, independent of this pattern, basically.
You can really customize it to do whatever you want. Honestly, you can have a middleware which makes a request. I wouldn't say it's a good idea, because every time you change anything, it might go ahead and make a request to a network, which isn't the best thing to do. But I think what we'll do now is I'll show you how to implement Redux, because we've never done that on a stream or a call or anything. And I think that would be really handy for you guys. So you guys saw now, right? Like it was actually pretty simple. Like I know it may not seem 100% simple, but in reality, with a little bit of practice, this would be, you'll get very comfortable with this, right? You get, I never thought about that. Adib says reduce plus flux equals redux. Maybe, yeah.
Sonny?
Yeah.
Sonny,
So-
what we
Okay, I'm going to answer both questions. Just one of you jump in first.
Okay, I'll go first then. So could I see your index.js file?
Yep.
Okay, so why did we add the state provider here?
Okay, so remember here, we have the wrapper, right? So yeah, this kind of wrapper around index. So imagine what it's actually kind of doing is you're kind of wrapping. So yeah, think of it like this, because what you're doing is you're providing the entire state, so that global state, to the entire app. So that's why it's kind of nested inside of it. You see that? Right?
Yeah.
Now we call this something called a higher order component. So this is, if you want to look into it more, this is called a higher order component, as in I'm referring to state provider. And the reason why it's called a higher order component, so I would recommend maybe reading into higher order components. They're usually called HOC, and they are kind of confusing at first. I remember when I first learned about it, I was like, what the hell? How the hell do you use this? But it made sense afterwards. And basically the whole point is it just enhances this. So now by wrapping it inside of this, it means that any level below, so app or anything underneath app, so like login, for example, means that I can use things like the state. Without
like providing state for the app, right?
Providing state for things like the app. Yes. You're providing state for the app, exactly. So it's literally providing state for the app. Yeah.
Hi, Sonny. I have a question.
Yeah.
For the state provider, for example, we have a certain, let's say, group where we only want to pass certain parameters to a certain component. So do we then wrap that component in a different state provider, or it's going to be the same for the whole app thing? For example, let's say for header, we want to only pass certain things to header, but no other part of the app can access that component, those values.
Right. So you could, I mean, what you could do, right, is you can create, rather than a state provider, you could provide something like a user provider, right? And then what you would do is inside of here, you would basically only wrap this with the user provider, right? So you do everything, but then you would have a user reducer in that case as well, right? So you would have user provider like this. And yes, that's actually a really good, that kind of like clicked something in my head as well, actually. So that's a good question. Oops, what am I done here? Yeah. So you could do this, and this would mean that only the login would get the user provider values and capabilities.
Okay.
Right. So that's actually a really good question. Yeah. Thank you for that. And before I answered Shrika's question, somebody else jumped in. Who was that?
Yeah, Sunny, I was just looking for the state provider explanation. What we are doing in the state provider, we are creating context API and something else.
Okay, awesome. So that makes sense now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Right. So
Sonny, I have a question.
Right.
Can you
last question, and then we'll move on. Yep.
Can you summarize the flow again between
Sure.
classes?
Yeah. So between, you mean explain the flow here?
No, in the code.
Okay. Yeah. So the way
I understood this.
Ooh. Be careful, dude. Try not to have an echo. Oh, okay. Who's that? I'm gonna go ahead and mute everyone. Just unmute yourself if you, whoever was asking the question. Okay. So to explain it again, very quickly, we have index.js. This state provider provides state to app, right? Inside of app, we can pull values from the state with this line of code, right? Inside of login, and then we can use the value like this, state.user. Inside of login, we pretty much, when we click the login button, we can have this dispatch, and we basically dispatch an action. Now, the reducer is always listing to actions. So in this case, it picked up the set user action, okay? What this does is it modifies the state. When we hear set user, it modifies the state like so. And then in login.js and app.js, this is where it gets re-rendered. So that's the entire state.
Sunny, just like in Amazon clone, we have created a reducer for products, right? Here we created a reducer for user. So for different, we have to create different reducer, or we have to
No, no.
manage
So,
single
so,
reducer.
so right now it's one. I didn't create a user reducer. I created one reducer for everything here. We haven't done any sort of separation. So here, this would go ahead and we can say, like say for example, you had products or basket, right? Here you could have a basket, which is an empty basket, right? So, but it depends. You can have different providers. We're not going to go into that right now. I do kind of want to get into Redux right now because I think it's going to benefit the most people. So let's kind of put a halt on questions for now and move on to Redux because that's going to be the most valuable part of this, right? So I want you guys to take a mental sort of like maybe you can pause the video so I have a screenshot or something, but you guys can go ahead and snap this. But the point is that this is, you saw in terms of the code itself, it's extremely clean. And believe me, I've been in like production environments and huge production environments. This is pretty clean code. Like, as in, I'll tell you that, like, yes, you can always make code cleaner and neater. And like, this can be like an object. So it's no longer like, you can always improve something. But in this case, yeah, we can. So Niha says, we should have joined earlier. Can you please let us know the agenda of the meeting? So yes, I'll try my best. I did mention it in the beginning of the call, but maybe earlier inside the announcement, I could do that as well. So now we're going to go ahead and learn Redux. So I'm going to show you guys, I'm pretty much going to get rid of all of the React context API stuff. And to show you how quick it was, pretty much, look, I get rid of that. I go inside my login. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm actually going to just get rid of the login stuff and say logins shiz happens here. And then go here, boom, get rid of this, go back to here. And then I'm just going to get rid of this and say the user is, so it's just kind of like dummy code right now. It's not really doing anything. Got rid of state provider and get rid of the reducer. And now we're back to square one. So inside my React app, state provider is still being pulled in from here. There we go. So now we have the fancy Facebook dinner, hashtag fancy dinner app. So this login component doesn't do anything now. Okay. A question was state provider and reducer path Redux or context API flow. So Don, to answer your question, state provider and reducer was part of the context API flow, but the pattern is consistent amongst Redux and React context API. So if you are confused, just remember, learn the pattern through the React context API because it's easier to do that, and then shift and use that knowledge on Redux. That's going to be the most beneficial way of learning Redux. It's going to be the most easy way of learning Redux. If I could have, put it this way, if I could have had someone sort of give me a cheat, right, like a cheat code to sort of like shortcut all the headache and all that sort of stuff, I would have pretty much gone ahead and done, I would have pretty much gone ahead and made it so that, let me go ahead and just do this. Yeah, I would have made it so that I actually learned the React Context API. Unfortunately, it wasn't available when I started learning the first time, but I would have learned the React Context API and then I would have shifted my knowledge over to Redux because it made it super easy to understand, right? Okay, so now what we're going to do, guys, is I'm going to share my screen again. Boom. Okay, so now, so this is a really awesome example because I forgot how to implement Redux. So you guys are going to see it completely from scratch, non-biased, nice, fresh slate, okay? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to Redux. And here, I'm going to go ahead and type in, so I'm not going to go on Google Image, I'm just going to type in Redux. Boom, getting started with Redux, okay? So this will be interesting because I can't remember how to do it. So it'll be pretty cool. So npm install. So pretty much, and this is, make sure like you guys really like sort of like, I want you to pay attention to a few things when we have this sort of tutorial right now, because one thing is going to be the sort of experience the natural sort of like, okay, so he's a developer, he's been coding for ages too, but he also gets stuck. Like kind of normalize that, right? Because it's not like I know the answer to everything. It's kind of like, okay, you know, it will go ahead and it'll make it a lot easier for you to do this. This is dope, by the way. I just saw, it says here, create React app actually has a template now for Redux. So, I mean, we could go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and try that in a sec. But I'll show you guys. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and do that. Let's do that because that might be really cool for you guys to go ahead and learn. So, also for everyone on YouTube saying it's already developed app they're showing today. No, this is fresh code, dude. So you're going in timeout. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the app that's running. And basically, I'm going to go out of this folder and I'm going to create another one. So I'm going to say npx. And you see here, it says npx create React app, my app, so the name. And I'm going to use this special option now, okay? So you guys can see here, right? So I've got, right. I'm going to do npx create React app. I'm going to change the name. I'm going to say this is called the Redux example, right? And then I'm going to say -- template Redux. Right now, this is really cool because I haven't, when I first used Redux, they didn't have this template. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and let's go ahead and see what that does. So while that's doing it, any questions, guys?
Yeah, hi Sonny.
Yes, I do have a question.
Shoot.
Just one question.
Yep.
How to decide like when to use context API and Flux and Redux? I know that the Flux is not being used in production environment on
Yeah.
large apps, but as for context API, as you told, relay is also coming up. So keeping that aside, how to decide for which should we go?
Right. So good question. To answer your question in a nutshell, what I would say is you want to basically go ahead and use, so don't use Flux because you have two better solutions. I would use React Context API. Personally, if it was a personal project, I'd use React Context API. I would then jump onto if needed, or if it was like a professional job. So put it this way, I've done so many professional jobs and freelancing jobs with the React Context API because it's simple. It does the job. I don't need to overcomplicate the build if I don't need to. So I would use that, right? Now, if I'm in a commercial environment, so I'm in a job and things like that, and chances are they're going to be using Redux, and there's for obvious reasons why. You'll pretty much experience that yourself when you start using it. But yeah, so to answer your question very shortly, I wouldn't use Flux. I would use React Context API and then use then use Redux. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one is
Hey,
powerful?
Sunny.
Yo.
Yeah, Sunny. I just wanted to go through the explanation of context API again. Just wanted to tell you my understanding, and in case if it's wrong, if you can just correct it.
Yeah.
So,
So what I will say to that is I'll give you a quick breakdown on the let me go ahead and share my screen. So I'll give you oh god damn it. Here we go. So I'll give you a quick breakdown on the diagram, but beyond that, what I would say is rewatch the video, go through the build again and kind of watch it that way, because that way it will benefit the most people on the call right now. So the purpose is that it provides a data layer. So you have this entire data layer around the app, okay? Now, this is going to be your component. For example, the login component, when you click the login button, it dispatches a login sort of set user action. At this point, the reducer is always listening to any actions that get dispatched. So it basically goes ahead and modifies the state. So it sets the new user. The new user, because it's changed and because we've subscribed to it inside the component, causes React to re-render, right? And that's basically the flow of what happens. Now, I would say if you're still stuck, make sure you just go ahead and play with it. Because honestly, as much as I will explain it now, oh guys, please watch the mics, because it's like I've got some really crystal clear headphones, and that really just chewed my ear off.
Sonny, I have a question regarding the comment you wrote.
So to have Redux in our project, we need to have a dash dash template Redux
Yeah,
command.
I'm getting back to that now. So we're going to jump into that in a sec.
Okay.
Yep. Guys, I'm going to mute everyone again because the mics are... Nope, that's not happening. Damn it. Yeah, okay. That literally was creeping up on my ear. So careful, guys, because...
You muted yourself, Sonny.
Oh, man.
Unmute yourself, Sonny.
Yeah, now we're good. Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. All right. So I'm going to carry on now, guys. So here. So we have the Redux example, okay? So I'm going to go cd Redux example. Boom, we're inside code insiders dot. And then what we'll do is open up another window so I can go ahead and close my old one. I don't want to save this one. I don't care about that. And then I'm going to boom, make it full screen. I'm going to zoom out a bit because I can't see anything. And you guys can see my screen right now, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so it's got a bunch of things now. So this looks a little bit different, right? So, and you can see I've got loads of stuff here. So I'm going to go ahead and spin this up. So I'm going to say npm start and go ahead and do it. So, right. So now, rather than this isn't the old app, we don't have this anymore. Once it goes ahead, okay, so now it's compiled. So you see, okay, let me zoom back out. There we go. Okay, this is kind of cool actually. All right, so you get this as your starter template. And then what we can do is look, plus, boom, add amount. Okay, so this adds like 2 to each. If I add like 10, add amount 18, 28. Okay, awesome. Add async. Oh, nice. Okay, so like asynchronously adds 10 to it. So anyone that doesn't know what async is, it means that it's not immediate. It's kind of like asynchronously. So asynchronous just means there's a delay. So usually when you do a network call, it's asynchronous because you kind of say you fetch some information from Google. It's going to take like 15 minutes, or not 15 minutes, like a few milliseconds to come back. Right? So you're going to have that little delay. So if I go ahead and do async, imagine I clicked it and then boom, it comes back. Right? This is kind of cool actually. So now what we'll do is we'll dive into the code and we'll explain what's going on. So what I'm going to do is we've got this special counter component. So in features, that's where they've made the counter component. So I'm going to hide that for a sec. And you can see there's loads of code running around here, right? So we're going to go ahead and make sense of this for you guys. Counter.module.css. So this is just CSS file. Counter slice is, again, so you see Redux, right? Redux looks a lot more complicated, right? It looks a lot more complicated. But the truth is it's not as complicated as you think, right? So what I would say is my biggest advice to you guys is to go ahead and do exactly what I did now. So install the template and then go to here, for example, right? Go to getting started with Redux. And pretty much you can go ahead and look and you see you got the basic example where you can pretty much go ahead and see, like, think of it this way. Look, so this is that reducer that we saw in the React Context API. Remember it had a switch, a case, and then a default, right? And then it created the store, and then basically you can subscribe to the store and you can dispatch actions from the store, which is basically when we did login and we wanted to go ahead and do set user, right? So it did that. Now let's go here to learn Redux. Okay, so now we don't need to care about this. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into the code now. So let's go back here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just getting a grasp on what's going on. So I'm going to delete everything I don't need. So app.test.js. I'm going to go to logo.svg, delete, setup test.js, boom, delete. Okay. Now in index.js, can you see the same thing? We have a provider, right? Provider surrounds app.js. Okay. So I want you guys to first notice how the approach is the same. We have like a component which surrounds app, right? And that injects basically the store into the app. Okay. Now I'm going to go to app. I'm going to go to store.js. Now you can see, in this one, the store is very simple. Okay. So the store is very, very simple. It's very clean. We don't really have much in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just opening up the chat in case anyone's saying, okay, so Brandon D, is it just me or Zoom flickering? It's because I'm running quite a lot of like screen sharing stuff going on at one time. So it can kind of flicker a little bit at times. See you later, Corey, as well. Thank you for joining, bro. Okay, so here, what I'm doing is I'm configuring the store. So basically, Redux has changed a lot actually since I used it last. So now they have this toolkit, okay? So this toolkit is basically saying configure store, and it's just exporting it. So here we can pretty much say export default, configure store, and then you're passing in a reducer. And this reducer has a counter, and then you're basically saying the counter reducer. Now, the reason why this actually makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of cool. I'll show you. So now let's go ahead and look at this. So inside of features, counter slice. So let's go inside of here. So basically inside of Redux, the way I want you to think of it, right, is in Redux, imagine this is the data layer, okay? And inside of it, we have the app, right? And then obviously inside of app.js, you have everything else, okay? So imagine this is app.js. Oops. Oh, one sec. App.js. There we go, right? So imagine we have, and then obviously everything renders inside of app.js, right? So that's why I'm doing this. Now, previously, we just saw it as one layer, right? So it's like, imagine like layers of an onion, right? You just had one layer, right? But what Redux does is it gives you several layers. So you can actually have like several different layers, and these will just be like different stores. Now, why would we want several layers? The reason is because you might want one layer, which is primarily going to hold the user stuff, right? So this one could be called the user. Just think of it right now as like the user layer, right? And another one could be like the basket layer, right? So another one could be the basket layer. So basically the user layer would only have information about the user, right? So it will basically, all the logging in, all that stuff would only happen in the user layer. The basket layer would be everything that's inside the basket. So it would be like add to basket, remove from basket. That's what the reducer, it would have its own reducer. The user would have its own reducer. So in Redux, we now have concept of multiple layers, and you can do that in React Context API, but it's more, you see it happen more in inside of Redux. So now, and what we call, guys, is these layers, we call them slices, okay? So this is called a slice of state or slice of the store. And it makes sense because you're basically slicing a slice of, like, you're basically slicing a piece of the store, right? So you're basically like slicing it up into layers. Okay, so we call this, so it says create slice. So in this case, we've got the counter slice, and this one is purely responsible for just that counter. Okay, now it has a name. Okay, it has an initial state. So remember, it's a very similar. So remember, in the reducer of React Context API, we had an initial state. So here we have an initial state. And then we have a value of 0. And then here, inside of reducers, we have an increment function, we have a decrement function, and we have an increment by amount. So these are basically those actions that we spoke about before. Okay? And we basically export this into this counter slice.action. So let's go ahead and go over to...
Sonny, I had a question.
Go for it.
Can you go back to your diagram?
Yep.
So is it okay to believe that the user layer would have everything that the basket layer has plus more, or are there two independent layers that have nothing to do with each other? It's totally isolated compartments.
That's a really good question. And to answer it, they're completely independent. So they're isolated from one another. And the reason why they're isolated from one another is to reduce complexity. So anything like logging in, anything to do with the user goes in the user layer, anything to do with basket stuff goes in the basket layer. Now, this is really important because imagine you had a huge app, right? You got thousands of, like hundreds of developers working on one app. You need this kind of isolation. Otherwise, like if they're all interlinked, it would get so crazy, so fast, and it would be so chaotic to be able to do anything. Because then stuff that happens in here is going to break stuff that happens elsewhere, and it just starts to get really kind of, a bit crazy.
And then how do I, if I need to access the other layer, do I still use the props way to get it around?
I'll actually show you how we create two layers.
Okay.
Yeah, because I can't remember as well, so it'd be awesome to go ahead and do that. Yeah.
So Redux
I have
basically
a
follows the
question.
React component design pattern, right?
Yeah.
So it splits into components.
Don't think of it as components. Think of this as a sort of a concept, because this is
the concept.
Yeah, this is kind of this is a component, app.js, header.js, post.js. They're components. This is kind of just like, think of it as like layers which kind of go around the components. And the reason, the easiest way is in index.js, this is basically the layer that has all of those slices in, and then it just gets provided to our component app, which then renders to several other components underneath it.
Sonny, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Since you're talking about the layer slices, and the first slice will be login, right? If I don't have an access to the login, then I cannot go further, right?
So I wouldn't do a login. I would do a user layer. Oh, I'll do
user
a user
layer,
slice.
yes.
Yeah, I'd have like a
Yeah.
user slice. Yeah.
Yeah, user. So it is encapsulated this other slices in user layer, right?
No, so just think of it as like, so the user layer would just have a user object inside of it. It would have a few. The user reducer would have like actions which listen to like logging in, logging out. Basket will have the basket array inside of it. It would have actions for adding item to basket, removing item from basket, and then in any other components, I can just pull from whatever I need to.
No, I think
So
what
you-
he's trying to
yeah.
what he's trying to ask is whether the user layer, the other layers have dependency on the user layer, which I'm guessing.
No. So they're completely separate. They're completely separate layers. They don't know
So
about
you're
each other.
saying, yeah. So you're saying, like in a Amazon kind of clone, without login, I can add into the basket. It is a separate layer, and when I logged in, then it will be stored into my account, right?
No, so okay, but try and separate. So this is a question I get quite a lot. Try and really separate your understanding of the layers with like because what can tend to happen is right now you're mixing understanding of the app, so the Amazon app, like storing things in your basket and your account being stored in your account with concepts of like of programming and remember. Yes, Amazon, you might be storing things on your account or inside your account, but that's because you make a network request to push data to a database and you pull it.
Yep.
You see, like it's a whole nother thing to approach, right? So,
Absolutely.
Yes, I would say try and keep them separate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Sonny, can we do the same thing what we are doing in Redux in using context API?
Yeah. So you mean the layers, like?
Yeah.
Yeah. We can do it. I'll figure out how to do it and then I'll show you guys how to do it. But the point is that honestly, I would recommend doing the single layer approach with React Context API and then using it. And guys, the reason why I'm saying this, is because I've made a serious, like a decent amount of money, like when with freelancing, just using one layer with the React Context API, and it served the purpose for many jobs. Now, sure, when I've gone into production environments and I've been hired as a developer, they've been Redux environments where it gets really nested, it gets quite integrated, it kind of gets a bit, it gets quite involved in that sort of stuff. Now, I would say my main thing here is just understand the pattern with the React Context API, and then just practice the slices in Redux, and then whatever you decide to do, you can pretty much go ahead and mix and match, pursue whatever you want to do. But that would be my main advice here for how to approach, like what you should be working on and what you shouldn't be on and that sort of stuff.
So somebody asked a question like, when do we use React context API and when do we use Redux? So Redux is for like when the application gets very complicated. So it's better to use Redux because we can make use of this multiple data layers and all these things. And for simple applications like, which doesn't involve much data and everything, so we can use context API. Is that true?
Yeah, so I would say keep it very simple. So keep it very keep it like super simple in the sense of like Put it this way, I would always vouch for using the React Context API first, and then I would kind of move to Redux only if needed, right? Like I wouldn't, honestly, Redux is heavy. Like you see, like the code here is quite heavy code. Like as in this is quite a lot of code. Whereas React Context API, I didn't have to do much, but I had like a crazy amount of code, right? So my advice would be to maybe just focus on whatever the simplest option is, right? Now bear in mind, if you've got a contract for a year, and so Mohammed Imran says, why are you only comparing easy to be even better? That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying pick the easy one to be better. I'm saying be smart. If you have a job which has like, there's going to be 30 developers, it's a startup company, it needs to grow, then maybe the decision to think about is maybe it's better to implement Redux from the get-go. But don't always think that just because Redux is the one that's used more, the one that's sort of like in practice, that it's the better one, because things come along and are better in time. Just like they improved Redux now. So now you've got all this sort of create slices and things like that. But try not to get sort of carried away with just whatever's, it's not always whatever's, but in my opinion, keep it as simple as it needs to be until you need the complexity. Yeah. So I
actually went down that same route, and when I learned it, what they said the difference is if you're using Redux, that's for data that's constantly being updated over and over and integrating, versus use context is more or less if you're not really updating the data as much, or it's a simple application.
Yes, exactly. So simple application, because so actually the way we use the context API is different to how a lot of people use it. They usually use it for like themes or dark mode or things like that. So options which aren't going to get updated much. But I kind of modified it so it kind of follows the Redux pattern, and I teach it in that way. So we kind of get Redux functionality, but not with so much, somebody said, Nazim said, Sonny, can you simplify, clean up the code for better understanding to get the same pattern as Context API? The pattern is already the same with this code, Nazim. It's just a case of you can't clean up code. Remember, yes, just because there was less code doesn't mean this is actually extremely clean code. This is actually really, really clean code, which is why this is my first time looking at this new implementation, and I can understand what's going on. So, well, I'll show you. Let's jump into the code. I think it'll make a lot more sense. So
before you go to the code, I have one small question for you.
Final question.
Do you have any place where I can get into a React Context API?
What do you mean?
Any tutorial, like a tutorial where I can.
I would say honestly, go ahead and just look at the React docs.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that. Thank you.
The React docs are the best. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so here we have the reduce with increment, decrement, and let's just find where this is used. So, so let's go to our counter, and here we can see increment, set increment. No, this is increment amount. But you can see we're pulling all the actions from counter slice, right? So we're pulling like increment from counter slice, and then here you can see it dispatch an increment action, right? And dispatch this and this and this, and then you can see here set increment amount, and then here's increment by amount, and then here they're doing some special shit, but. The point is that what we're going to do now is I don't like how they've done all this. They kind of overcomplicated some stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another folder, right? So I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to create another folder, and this one's going to be called, let's call it the user. So now we're going to try and recreate what we did. Yeah, so again, like I'm going to try and sort of do this from the beginning. So we're going to say user, and here I'm going to have a login component. So we'll say login.js, RFCE, boom. And this is going to say H2, I am the login component. Okay. And now what we're going to do is I'm login component. So there we go. And then inside of my app.js, I think I'm rendering out the logo. There we go. Get rid of that. Save it. And
you also have to get rid of the image tag.
Yeah. So it's logo. There, oh yeah, nice. Thank you. And then here we go back, and now you can see we got this, right? Now, obviously at the top, I'm going to keep it super simple. Above everything, I'm going to render our login component. So this is the one that we just created. Boom. Now we have I'm login component at the top. Yeah. So we're all familiar with this one, right? So ignore the stuff at the bottom for now. We're going to use it as reference. This is my, truth be told, right? Try and get used to being familiar with the unfamiliar. Now that kind of like doesn't make sense at first, but what I mean by this is, for example, right now I forgot how to code in Redux. Not forgot how to code in Redux, but I forgot the exact sort of, I mean, you don't need to memorize this. You just need to know the pattern. So I can get all of this working, but I don't need to remember every single line of code and every single, all I need to know is how it works. And then you pretty much can go ahead and build it. So try and get used to being in that situation and working in that way. And then it'll make your life a lot easier because you'll be able to pick up on, especially when you go into a production environment, you're pretty much going to understand, you're pretty much going to, you're going to be able to move into a new environment, which is very intimidating, very sort of like, oh my God, I have no idea what's going on here, but you're going to be better at understanding that, right? Because then you're going to be able to dive into anything and sort of learn, build that sort of skill. So yeah, get familiar with the unfamiliar. Also Ganesh from UK Manchester, awesome dude, nice. So login. So now we're going to basically go into our login component, and I'm going to look at the counter.js, right? So let's see how they've done it. So they created this counter slice. So inside of user, I'm going to create a user slice. So I'm going to create a user slice, and what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to copy the code from counter slice into user slice, and I'm going to rename everything that I want. So the name is going to be user. It's not going to be counter slice. It's going to be user slice. The initial state is not going to be value. It's going to be a user with no, right? Here is the reducer. So I don't need any of this stuff. What I'm going to have is I'm going to have something like set user, which takes the state, and it basically goes ahead and says it's going to take a state and an action. So this is the same pattern we did before. And it's basically going to go ahead and say state.user is equal to action.user. So I think that's how you do it. And then we can also make another action called logout. Oops. Let's make one called logout. And this one is basically going to say state.user is equal to null. So these are two actions, right? And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. And then we need to go ahead and export these. So export that one, delete this one. And you can see it says counter slice. This is not the counter slice. This is the user slice. And I go down and I don't need any of this. Select count. Selectors, right? Selectors are really cool. Selectors exist both in React Context API and in Redux. And a selector is basically just a piece of code that, so for example, here we can say select count. So this one we can say select user. Basically, it just goes into the state. And in this case, we're just going to go ahead and return the user. Now, this is a very basic version. But imagine you had select basket length, right? Then you would have, you'd have a reduce here, which basically go ahead and tell you, or it would be like state.basket.length. It's just something which is, you might not see the value in it now, but just know that they exist. Okay? Know that they exist. And that might, Pedro says, Sonny, at the end of the class, could you make the final code available to download? For this one, I could, yeah. For the Redux stuff, I definitely could. I would say maybe try and give it a go. And try and do it again alongside. That might be the best way for you to learn it, because all I used was the create React app with the -- template Redux, and I got this up and running. But yeah, so now what we're going to do is we're going to say,
question, like, do we have to follow exactly what they do, or you can modify or change different stuff, like without following the same pattern?
Wait, say that again, sorry.
Like, what I'm seeing here is like you are just changing the names.
Yeah.
And then like we follow the same pattern.
Yeah. So
do we have to follow the same pattern? Is it a must, or we can change it? Like
no. So remember, so this is just the way that Redux is sort of written in this case. This is kind of different to even how I used Redux. But the point is that like it will. So keep watching, and then I'm pretty sure I'll answer your question in just a sec. Yeah. So here I'm going to change this to counter slice to user slice. And I'm basically exporting the reducer right here, right? So export reducer, save it. I'm going to go into counter slice here and let's see where they, so now let's go into our store. And then here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import my user reducer from user / user slice. And then here, configure store. I wonder how we do this. I wonder if it's the same thing and you just do it like user is user reducer like this. And then let's wonder, see if our app logs. Okay, so app's loading. And you can actually install something called the Redux Dev Tools. So I think I have them installed. And let's go ahead and check. So I've got the Redux Dev Tools here. And if we go to the state, is this right? What the heck is this? Open in a panel, open in a panel. Nope, this is not right. Okay, ignore that. We'll touch on that another session. Have I got them in here? Redux. Okay. Yeah. Okay, there we go. So download Redux DevTools and then right click, go to your thing, go here, hit Redux, and then you go to state. And now you can see like the counter is there, the user is here. So Redux is really cool because once you implement it, here you'll be able to see all the actions that get dispatched, right? And you'll also be able to see, you can actually rewind in time different things. So I'll show you how that works, right? So we have I am the login component. Now what we're going to do is let's go to the login component and here. Now, how do I use the user? Like before, obviously we had that magic line, which is why I love the React Context API. I don't remember how to do it in Redux. So well, I'm going to go into counter.js and see how they do it. So they import everything that they need. So I'm going to go ahead and push this code to the right. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and import. It was set user and it was logout. These were the actions and they were from, and let's go ahead and do it from the user slice. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pull them actions in. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull in the use dispatch and the use selector. I don't need the use selector. I just need
Oh, wait, Sonny, you got set use it instead of user.
Oh, thank you. Nice. See, that's the kind of laser vision you need. That's awesome. Yeah. So that's good. And then what we're going to do is to get hold of the dispatch, which is that little gun that sort of allows us to shoot into the data layer. I can go here and go const dispatch equals use dispatch. So I'm just, remember, literally, I'm looking at how they've used it here and I'm pretty much going ahead and reusing it. Okay. Then here, we don't need the increment amount, blah, blah, blah. And now I guess all we can do is pretty much go ahead and say, let's go ahead and try it out. Let's have a button which says log me in. Okay. And on click here, I'm going to do an inline function. Or let's just do it. It'll keep it simple. Let's just say login to app. So same thing that we did last time. So that way you guys are a bit more familiar. So we can say const login to app is an arrow function. And then here, we're going to go ahead and say dispatch. And I'm going to say set user, which is an action. And it takes a payload. And the payload in this case would be a user. And the user is just, let's go ahead and say SSS Sanger. Okay. Now, let's see if that works. I mean, if it might work. So let's go ahead and log me in. Whoa. Okay. So it set the user. Now what I can do is I can click this, go to action. And I can see if I click this, the type is user set user. Payload is a user, this is Sanger. And then I can see in the state now, but look, the state didn't get updated correctly. So this is where we need to check what's going on. Okay. So the state didn't get updated correctly. So whereas if I do this, so you see when I increment, it shoots off the increment value, right? And you see what's awesome here, guys. I want to show you something quickly. If I go ahead and just focus on this increment one. So if I click increment, decrement, yeah. Now check this out, guys. So let's go ahead and increment a bunch of times. I can actually go ahead and rewind the app. So I can go back to this point and it rewinds the app. How sick is that? So that you can actually rewind the app.
Damn.
That is so cool.
That's cool,
I didn't
right?
know you could do that.
Crazy.
So you see, like, this is why, like, you can actually rewind the app. So like, and what it's doing is it's just dispatching the actions as you see, like they're kind of highlighted. And what you
So
can
it kind
do,
of has a database, like we can call it like a local storage database kind of thing.
yeah, and this is more like a debugging tool. But what you can actually do is you can skip
Alright.
an action. So if I skip an action, look, it skipped an increment, so now it's 9. If I skip this one,
I used Redux from a long time and never knew this happens.
yeah, it's awesome, right? You can do a lot of stuff. You can even do like some kind of I don't know what this is, but you can actually even gives you some testing code. It actually gives you the testing code, which is insane as well. Like it actually gives you testing code, so you can actually go ahead and add this in a test, and it will go ahead and like adjust.
Respect to Redux.
Yeah, and it will let you do
So
that.
Redux DevTools just basically makes Redux way more easier to visualize and understand.
Exactly. So now if I click log me in, so now for debugging, right? I saw this one got fired off. I click on the action. I saw that, okay, it's got the payload. This looks good, but something isn't working because if I check the state, I haven't got the user in the state. So now let's go and check out why. So let me see why, because this is even sort of, for me, this is kind of interesting. So state.value equals this. Okay. So now what we can do is let's go to our user slice. And here I say state dot. So we've got this one. I'm going to push this over here. And here we did action dot payload. Okay. So remember when we looked at this, the action said payload, right? So my, so now you can see payload user, right? So here, what we're going to do is we're going to say payload dot. So now this is where I made the mistake. So action dot payload dot user. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and do it now. So now if I do this, log me in. Oh, okay. Why is it? Okay. There. Log me in. Whoa. Okay. So now this is where it gets really cool. So I just hit the user set user, right? And it says, it shows me a diff. Now this is the awesome bit, right? Now, thank you so much, Abdul. He says, Sonny, you're the best. I'm getting it now. And he also, Troy, thank you so much. Really glad that you guys are actually following along with this. It's really awesome to see that. So we got the action, and here we set a payload user, right? So this tool is really good because you see, it wasn't even a hard debug step. But when I did it in React Context API, it was kind of like, this is why you can see why it's used in production environments as opposed to not being used, right? So now if we go to the state and I check it, hey, there we go. And the reason why it shows in the diff now is because when I hit, like, this is when I initialize the app. For some reason, this is why it fires off by default. Then when I do user, this is a set user. And also, Redux groups things in an easy to understand way. For example, this is inside the user slice and it's a set user action. If I do this one, it's inside the counter slice increment action. So it's very friendly. You see that? And then here the diff shows that, okay, this action changed the user from no to Sasasanga. Now, what I'm going to do is to show you even how powerful this is. We've got the logout. Okay, so now the logout actually, and you know what? This is actually, they've changed Redux to make it a lot easier now. So this is actually a lot easier than it used to be. So now inside of login.js, it's tempting me to kind of use it again. So now if we go to button, and here what I'll say is log out. Okay, and here I'm going to do on click like this. I'm going to have an inline function because I just want to show you both. And then here, what I'm going to say is, thank you so much, Suraj. He says, Sonny, your teaching is really good. That makes it easier to learn. Thank you, dude. On click here, I'm going to say log out. Okay, so log out. And it's just pretty much, it has no, like here is the log out. I'm not passing anything along with it. State automatically gets passed. So right now, that's it. Now, let's check it out. So log me in. Boom. Set user, okay. Log out. So, okay, interesting. Nothing happened.
It needs to be a dispatch. No?
Hey, I was hoping somebody shut it. I promise you, I was hoping somebody shut that out. Nice. Okay, awesome. So dispatch. There you go. And you'd basically go ahead and dispatch, because remember, in order to do that, that sort of, you need to dispatch it into the data layer. So we can do that. Now, if I go ahead and log in, and log out, boom. And you see, if we go to set user, it shows that we set the user to Sasasanga, log out, boom, it went back to no. Now, how do we use the actual information? right? How do we actually go ahead and use it? So let's see how they use it inside a counter. So here, where they pull it? They've got the actual increment count. So count they pull from, they use a selector to pull the count, okay? So I wonder how we can do it. So we can go ahead and do selector. Okay, so I'll show you guys how to do it from a selector. And then I think, I'm not sure, there's another way to do it as well, but I'm going to show you the selector way because it's practice. But let's go to counter slice, and here is the select count. This one will go, no, I don't want this one, I want the user slice. Here I'm going to say select the user, and this will go ahead and give me back the user, right? So this is a selector, and basically it's a controlled way of going into your store and getting what you want. Because remember, the controlled way of doing this stuff is going to allow you to actually go ahead and work in a sort of like a more functional, maintainable way. So here, select user. So here, state.user. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into login.js, yeah. And I'm going to basically, so again, like I'm using an example of the counter app. And this is what I'm saying. The templates are really good, guys, because you can pretty much just use it as like a reference point. And remember, like I said, I hadn't coded in Redux for a very long time, but coming back, I literally used the reference they gave, and pretty much it's easy to pick up on because I know the pattern, right? So here, rather than the count, I'm getting the user. And this is not select count, it's select user. And I'm just going to go ahead and import it from here. So I'm going to say select user. There we go. And now what I can do is I can pretty much just use the user. So I can pretty much at this point say I am the login. So I am the login component. And then I can say if there is a user, then I want to render out a H2 tag, which says the user is user. And then here I'm going to say else render out a H2 tag, which says nobody is signed in. Boom. Okay. Let's go back, and it says use selector is not defined because we need to go ahead and import the use selector, save it, go back. And it says, oh, okay. It says objects are not valid as a React child. Now, the reason why this is happening is because the actual user is a, oh, come on. Why is that happening? Let's go back here. Oh, my mouse is bugging out. One sec, guys. Okay, we're good. 1 second, guys. My mouse is freaking out. Okay. Oh man, I think my mouse just finally died. Okay, you know what? I think we're gonna have to go back to no mouse. Okay.
My entire laptop died.
Right, there we go. Back to old school trackpad. Okay, so now what we have is the objects are not valid as a React child. So what I would do at this point to debug this is I would comment this out, and here I would do console log user to see what I'm pulling in from the user, right? Let's go ahead and do that. So now if I go to my console, I can see I've got the user, but it's no, okay? If I log in, I can see I get the user. Now, why was it freaking out? Because console.log user, and then here I was saying the user is user. So user, I think it's because it's got user inside of user. So if we do user.user, is that right? Or am I being a bit weird? No. Log me in. Yes. Okay. So I was actually, this is kind of where you got to be careful of, because remember inside of the selector here, see I done state.user, but it's actually the user slice is the thing. So here we need to say state.user.user, because if we go into counter slice, it's state.counter.value, and value is the initial state. So here it's like, this is the state, the overall global object, and then it's the slice that we're talking about. So in this case, it's the user, and then it's the object. And in this case, then it reaches this point, right? So you need to be careful of that bit, right? So now let's go back, and we go back to our login, and here we can say user, And now it says, no, okay, log in, done. Now we can go back, get rid of this. This should now be fixed. So if I undo this, save it, it says nobody is signed in. Log me in, boom. Log out, boom. Awesome. Let's go to Redux and have a look what happened. If I now, this is what's cool, guys. If I go ahead and jump back to sign in, see that the user is SS Sangha, jump back to sign out, and I can pretty much test the actions here. So really,
damn, man, I'm already super pumped. It's like 2 a.m. now. Like, this is so
Sunny,
cool.
it's cool, right?
Sunny, it means that we don't need automation tools. It will eliminate automation tools.
No, there is a time and place for an automation tool, which is separate to this. Yeah, there is a time and place. So automation tools could be used for testing. They could be used for other use cases. I wouldn't rule out automation tools, to be honest. I would Cypress, for example, is an amazing automation tool because you have different types of testing. You have unit testing, which is basically where you test at the code level. You have something called automated testing, which is like or like integration testing, which is basically where you run like an automation sort of I guess framework or software like Cypress. And basically Cypress is like, say if I ran a test, it would basically do an automated test of like, it would log into the app, it would place an order, it would check that this happened, and then it will go back, and it does all of that automatically. So there is a place for automation that's separate to this. Try not to get this confused. If anything, this would be unit testing, because here you can basically say, when I click the login, this is the test that needs to run, for example. Okay, and here it's saying expect this to be the state when you just did this, right? So like, but we're not going to talk too much about testing because it can get very, very deep into that. There's testing frameworks like Puppeteer, I think one. Selenium is another one, but Cypress is a really good new one. I've used Cypress before. It's really, really fast. Yeah.
Hey, Sonny.
Yeah.
Sonny. Oh, sorry.
Sonny, so yeah. So this in your slice.js user, can we use the same spread or operator like how you were doing in the context API also, like for the previous values?
So say that again, sorry.
Like in the context API, you were storing the previous values also.
Previous values.
Right? On dispatch of an action. So whenever I dispatch some action.
Yep.
So for example, yeah, so you were actually saving some information like the initial values of the state, and then you were adding the object onto it.
Oh, you were saying, okay, yeah. So
the spread.
Yeah.
He's talking about the spread.
The spread operator.
So
spread
very, very good question, right? Now, what's really clever about Redux is the way they've built it and the way they have this sort of toolkit that they have. Right? So let's go inside the user. You see this Redux.js toolkit, right? Now, the clever thing is the way that it's built, right, is that this is something called an immutable change. So even though it looks like I'm changing it directly, right? But the Redux toolkit actually, it cleverly does it behind the scenes without us having to do things like, so that this is basically what it's saying. So let me go ahead and make this a bit bigger. So it says Redux toolkit allows us to write mutating logic in reducers, which means that it looks like I'm just changing the state.user, right? But under the hood, what it's doing is it's detecting the change that I want to make, and then it's doing it in a way that basically preserves the original state, and it basically creates a new state, right? And it just updates only the things that needed to be changed. But you can code it like this, right? Which is easier and it's more safer than doing the spread, right? So Redux toolkit before this wasn't actually supported. So before you would have had something like this. You would have had something like this. You would have had state.user. And then you would have user is like this. You'd have something like that before, right? But they've upgraded the toolkit now so that you can pretty much just go ahead and write very simple code like this. You can just pretty much say change the state.user to the action.payload.user when we set the user. To be fair,
so I automatically have the access to the earlier values also.
No, so remember the earlier values that you're talking about, everything is actually inside of this. So if you need the earlier values, you can get them with state. You can just say state.user, that's the earlier value. Action.payload.user is the new value.
Okay.
Yeah, so here, if I was to do, and we can test this, we can say console.log, let's just say check me, and here I'm going to say state. Let's see what it gives back inside the state here. Right, so now if I go into set user, so let's go ahead and refresh. Let's do console. Let's do set user. So check me. Look, he's got a bunch of all this weird shit. You see, we don't really. They protect you, and trust me, it's very good that they protect you against this stuff because it's you don't. So there's a principle in like functional programming called immutability, and the whole point of immutability is you never want to actually mutate an object and say, yeah, like you never want to say like this object should now be this new object, like, because what you're doing is you're kind of overwriting the object. So we try to stay away from that, and we use something called guys, please mute your mic if you're not talking. Yeah, so okay, somebody
Sonny, you muted yourself again.
Muted.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. So pretty much what we do is we do something called immutable changes. So I would recommend reading up on immutability because I'm not going to cover it too much now. But put it this way, it updates the state in a very clever way. Okay.
So what if you console state that user? Would that have worked?
I mean, we can try. We definitely try. Console.use console.log. To be honest, I don't think so. I think it will show you some kind of proxying stuff. Okay, no, it did work. Yeah, so if you do log me in, so but this, remember, the initial value before I clicked this was no, so that's why you saw this, but it's changed now. But the action.payload would have been the one. So if I now do this and I say, so let's just do it like this: previous value is, I think this will answer your question. Previous value is this. New value is action.payload.user. Okay, now let's try it out. So log me in. Previous value is no, new value is SSSanger. And now if I click it again, previous value is SSSanger, new value is still SSSanger.
So Sonny, then can I actually go into that state.user and actually add the previous value and the action.payload.user?
I mean, firstly, why would you want to do that? Secondly, you shouldn't do that because you shouldn't.
I mean, in a case like, say, I'm adding products, right, like into the cart, and I've added like one by one.
Right. Okay. So if so imagine we had like, let me just go ahead and obviously we shouldn't have it here, right? But what I'm going to say is, just imagine we had a basket, like an array. Okay. What you could do is you could say like, let's just say add to basket, right? So we had some kind of add to basket, which took a state, took an action, and it did this, right? Then here, what we're going to say is we're going to say state.basket equals, here I would do this. I'll do whatever the state.
Right.
Yeah. Plus.
I got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, that was a really good question actually, because I think that would have helped a lot of other people. And then you can say action.payload. That's a really good question, dude. Yeah. And you can say action.payload.item, and that's how I would do it.
Thanks for clearing it out.
Yeah. That was a really good question actually. Yeah, because I think even for me that actually made a lot of sense. So yeah, you could do that, and then that would pretty much.
Also, Sonny, about the action.payload.user. Do you get the method .user there on the payload because of the name you said right at the beginning of the user slice constant? You see you have a name there, which you set to user.
This one. Oh no, this.
No, upper.
Okay, this is the name of the slice. So remember this level. So the actual. So imagine if we go back to store. So you see this slice. This is where we name the slice. So remember, like that onion peel, like the sort of layers, right? This is the name of the slice. So for example, if we go to the counter slice, the name would be counter, right? But here,
but that's what triggers the payload. That's what I'm saying. It's the method for payload. I just tested it.
No, so it's actually where we do the method for the payload is actually inside of login here. This one, you see that? That's the one. So if I change this to username, I'll show you. So now if I go to the user slice, if I change this to username, now I have to change the payload here to username. And if I do this and I save this now if I go ahead and do log me in, see, it works like that. Oh, but the new value is undefined. So let's go to Redux and let's check why, because it says user, okay, and let's go to action, the action.payload.username, action.payload.username, username, and then state.user equals action.
In console log, you have to change the user to username.
Yes, most likely, yeah. Yes. Perfect, yeah. Payload.username, that's it.
So Sonny, so it's easier than the API context API. It's less code than the.
You know what, dude? I have to admit with you, like I hadn't played with it before they done all this upgrade stuff, like with the toolkit. It's actually really good. Like as in, I would actually recommend that we all try and do this now, because you saw, and I will actually say that as in they've upgraded it so well that this is awesome. Like as in if you guys can learn this is actually really powerful. Now, bear in mind, there are things like map state to props, map props to dispatch that you're going to see, because in production, this is very new this way, yeah? Now, the way that you're going to see it in sort of typical environments may not look like this. This is using like hooks, and it's using this hook, and it's using a special kind of hook. The way you would do it is, I think what I might do is next time show you guys a sort of Redux project, like an old school way of doing the Redux way, because that's what you might get in sort of in a project, right? I'm just gonna go ahead.
Yeah, that would really help. Yeah, that's right.
You know, like get some kind of big, like a big old school project, and we kind of build on it like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and.
You got muted.
Yep. So I'm gonna go ahead and. Joe, I think that's you actually. Is that you?
Yeah, I try to mute everyone.
Wait. Okay, no, sorry.
I have a question.
Sorry, Joe, it's not you. I accidentally. Yep. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so basically when I want to store the values in the session, like how can we communicate between context API or Redux with the session so that I don't need to store every time in the cookie basically. So that for this, like there is no communication between cookie and my even the context API or the reducer or the Redux.
So cookies and sort of you're talking about persistence. So you basically mean when so when I refresh the page, like how do we keep track of what the count was on basically, or something like that, right?
Correct.
There's loads of ways you can do it. There's like Redux offline. So there's something called Redux offline. There's Redux persist. You see like build offline first apps. There's probably a really new one, Redux persist. Persist reducer. You see like there's, but I would keep looking around and maybe find the most modern one, I guess. But you could do it loads of ways. I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to jump too much into this right now, but let's just try to use persist. Let's see if we can use like Redux.
Any reference will be okay. Like I'm doing this for a project basically.
Okay, dope.
Like
so what you want to do is, it's called hydration. Okay, so it's like what you're trying to do is called basically what we refer to it as like. So I'd recommend looking at this kind of thing, like as in like Redux persist or Redux offline, right?
Okay.
And what it will do is they're built in such a way that they will use either local storage or they'll use like a cookie or something like that. So, and then what you do is basically, you see like we've got the provider here, and then you have another thing which basically wraps. So the root component would be your app, but then here persist-kit would be something that like basically goes ahead and, it will provide like the persistence layer. So it will provide like the local storage layer. But let's click on basic usage and let's see how persist or, but long story short, you're going to need either one of these. It'll be Redux persist or Redux offline. And the whole point is that what's going to happen is when your app loads up again, so imagine like if I refresh now, it goes to 0. So let's say I do this and I implement something like Redux persist or Redux offline. Then what happens is when I refresh the app, it does something called hydration. So it rehydrates, which means imagine the app starts blank and then it rehydrates and it pushes the values that it had in local store back into the app, which means that it basically goes back to 5.
So there is some time gap between them.
No, but it will happen super quick. Like you won't see it.
Okay.
But you mean you could do that?
I think I have a question based on that. Like last night, I developed the Facebook app following this thing. But whenever I refresh the page, you know, like the person who is logged in will immediately log out. So it will bring me back to the login page for me to log in again. Is it because of this persistent stuff?
Yeah. So
because we are not storing the session.
The Facebook app used Google login.
Google.
Yeah. So 2 things to consider. If you use the email and password implementation, which we've done with the Amazon build, I think, if you do that, then it actually Firebase have built it under the hood, so it will persist by default. So as soon as you go back on, it'll check if they're logged in, it'll grab the user, and it'll basically throw you back in to where you're at. But with the Google one, I would recommend that you research on because I mean I didn't implement it for that one, but I think it'll be Google Firebase. User, oh God's sake! Sorry, that was someone again. Google user authentication. So Firebase Google user authentication persistence is what you're looking for, and basically what you can do. See, authenticating state persistence, right? So again, that's a skill, guys. To literally learning how to Google the right things. Just practicing that skill is going to help you like dial in that sort of, that ability to sort of find what you're searching for. So here you can basically look, you can store it in local, you can store it in session, or you can store it in none. Now here, this is awesome because what you can do is you can actually go ahead, new sign will be persisted with session. So remember, set persistence. Okay. So what you might need to do is before you actually go ahead and do that, you need to basically go ahead and call the firebase.auth.setPersistence method. So this one here, and then basically that will go ahead and persist the login session on your computer. So here we should have, here's what you wanted to do. Yeah. So this is exactly what you need to do. So basically you most likely in your code have at some point here, new Firebase auth, you basically, there is a snippet of code. I remember exactly in where it says sign up with pop-up, sign up with redirect provider, right? That bit, all you need to do is before you call that, make sure you do .auth.setPersistence and then you do this. But change .none, change it from .none to .session. So this one, yeah? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this for you guys in the Zoom chat, and you guys can actually go ahead and read that. But go ahead and play that out because give that a try and you can see that. Suraj said, Sonny, how did you gain such enormous knowledge through a lot of practice or enormous reading? Honestly, it's a mix. It's a mix of throwing yourself in the deep end. It's a mix of just when you're in production environment, you get a lot of practice. Also, guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, please smash the thumbs up if you're enjoying it. We really appreciate that. But yeah, what I would say is if you like in production environments, just by being around other developers who have all sorts of like experience and kind of like have that knowledge, just literally act like a sponge, right? So which means that like literally if you're never go into coding with the mindset of I know this, right? Even today, I went in with the mindset of I don't remember how to code Redux. So I'm going to keep an open mind. I'm going to keep myself like quite flexible to it, but we're going to go ahead and start with a fresh mindset. So Mohammed says, how can we inject Redux module to our projects? If you go to the Redux, so literally just type in Redux, go to getting started with Redux.
You said you wanted to post, the link to the persistent stuff, Google Firebase on.
Oh, I did do it. I'll put it here again. One sec. So just point up. There we go. Oh man.
Yeah, Sonny, I had a question.
Yeah.
Like suppose in an application where, we route from one page to other page. So suppose I am reporting one page and I have huge grid data, like some about 1,000, 1,500 records.
Yep.
And then if I click on a particular like row, and then it will redirect me to that particular drilled down report.
Yep.
And then I have a back button which will take me back to all that records.
Yeah.
So will Redux be beneficial over there? Like, I don't want to pull all that records again from the database. Like, it's just a back routing from one page to other.
So, okay. So in that case, okay, you need to be careful of two things now. I would say, so one thing would be, right. So one thing you'll have a problem with possible stale data. So you need to think about that from an architecture's perspective. You might have stale data. So imagine you pulled in a bunch of Abdul says, did Sonny post a link on Slack over here? So this is the link, guys. I'm going to post it in. Oh, everyone in the waiting room. Sorry. I don't know. Everyone in meeting. Okay. Oh man, I hate this. There we go.
Sonny, there's no one waiting because
No.
waiting.
No. I meant in the chat. Yeah, in the Zoom did some weird update. I just dropped the link like 5 times in the chat. So sorry guys, you can go ahead and check it out. Sorry about that. That's why I didn't make. I thought I'd sent it before.
Just to add to what Tushar said, is Tushar referring to like a KPI scenario on a dashboard where you can click and you can go to the. Tushar, are you referring to that? Something like that?
No, it's like a master. Suppose I'm having distributors, like all distributors for one country, and then I'm clicking on distributor, and it will take me to new page, and it will show all clients of that distributor.
Okay.
And there is a back button, so if I click on back, it will take me back to all distributors.
So yeah,
I don't want to want to reload that data again from database.
So
it's like
So what I would recommend is have some kind of, you could use something called Redux Offline. With Redux Offline, the benefit of that would be once you pull in some information, so for example, into the app, it would basically kind of cache it. Okay, so it would kind of store it into your local sort of local storage. But you would have to remember, whenever you do that, you have to think about the architecture. You have to think about right, is it going to be stale data? Are the sort of you just said there's manufacturers or something, right? Is it important that's always up to date, right? If it is, then you need to check, right? Is the cached version less than 5 minutes old, or is it less than 15 minutes old? It
would be only just for that phase, if he's on that report, like the URL, if he is going to that report, and if that's an internal drill down, from that distributor, he's going. But if he's going back to other menu roles, and if he comes back, he needs to reload it again.
So you can do that. Don't get me wrong, you can do it. But remember, what it seems like a very natural experience to us as a human is on the computer side. You have to think of it in terms of an architecture. It's like building a house. You have to kind of build things with the support underneath it so that it supports that functionality from the get-go, or you have to implement something like Redux Offline so it allows you to enhance the app so it has that functionality. Otherwise, you will run into a problem where you have some kind of logical gap where you're why is it refreshing here and not refreshing here? And what can happen, and I'm just kind of giving you my advice on this based on experience, is you can kind of build very nasty sort of solutions, right? Very sort of tricky, nasty solutions which work, but then are a nightmare to touch. And you don't want to get into that position. So make sure you're in a position where you think about those things from the get-go. But honestly, dude, what I would say is just making sure that you have make sure you just have an open mind and just practice it. Honestly, just practice it. And if you don't get it right the first time, don't worry about it. Just keep doing it until you get it right. Every time, honestly, I've done so many solutions where if I look back, I'm like, that was the shittest, crappiest solution ever. But truth be told, it worked and I learned from it. And now I can pretty much go ahead and improve my the next time I do it. That's it, So don't sort of beat yourself up about it. But I just saw some comments now. Shyam says, the Redux data layer, where is it stored? Is it browser storage? It's actually it's local. So remember, it's non-persistence, which means that if you refresh, you're still going to lose. So you would have to implement something like Redux Offline or Redux Persist or something like that to go ahead and push it into browser storage. Huda Rahma says, as my first time in Redux, I stayed till now trying to understand your nice explanation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. Troy says, Sonny is a very organic teacher, nice experience and skill and open attitude to training others. That's good and skill. Thank you very much, dude. Awani says, huge respect for Sonny. Thank you so much. Thank you. Honestly.
Sonny, I need a small clarification.
One at a time, guys.
Okay.
Sonny, I just had a question. So you mentioned about two sort of states, state user and payload.user, right?
Yep.
So these are like the initial and the last state. If in case you wanted to get states that are in between, like version states, that you can sort of use it as a fetch dot command. Sometimes does it substitute Postman and things that you can use within the browser to analyze data, you remove stale data, things like that.
Do you mind repeating again? Because I kind of lost a bit halfway. So just repeat that one more time.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, does Redux solve the issue with sometimes analyzing data, taking up data that are stale, analyzing them, just the same purpose as Postman. What it does is fetching the data, analyzing it. Maybe you can remove it from the state.
So remember this.
Data.
Remember, try and think of everything individually. So firstly, Postman doesn't do that. Postman is literally a client that can just make a request. It can make a post request, a get request. It doesn't analyze. It just literally can make the request to get the data, right? Thank you so much, Patrice.
Okay.
So it only makes the request right now. Redux allows you to pretty much go ahead and allows you to go ahead and have just literally store the data in some way, right? Like you literally, all you can do is like it's a state management sort of a tool, right? Think of it that way. So when it comes to analyzing stale data, you can have something like a middleware. So Redux supports something called middleware. You could do that, and basically you could check if the data that you're fetching, for example, the selector, this could be like where you enhance the selector. You can pretty much go ahead and enhance the selector so that you can say, if I grab the user and the user's timestamp is like more than 5 minutes ago, go ahead and fetch the user in. I mean, it's a little example, you know. That's kind of a sort of quick example of that. Shyam says, Sonny, can you give a little bit more info about Redux Saga? So Redux Saga is something that we use when Redux Saga is actually something we use when that's all right, dude. Welcome. So Redux Saga is something that we use when we want to do anything asynchronous. So I mentioned asynchronous stuff before. It's pretty much a case of when you make a request, right? And it's got like a delay because you're pretty much going across the network and then you're coming back, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a delay. Redux Saga is a very popular library in Redux to do that. There's also Redux Thunk. So two options I would recommend sort of consider this kind of homework to go away, have a look at Redux Thunk and Redux Saga. They're two things which are going to allow you to handle asynchronous actions and side effects. So side effects are basically, put it this way, imagine I went ahead and Atharva says he uses Thunk. Imagine you went ahead and you pretty much sent a request to go ahead and fetch some records from Google, right? Let's just say you did that for some reason. And then let's go ahead and imagine that you, it came back fine, right? But let's say a side effect of that was that the data failed to load or the network dropped or something like that. How does your app account for that? Right, so Redux Thunk, Redux Saga, they all allow you to handle side effects of asynchronous actions. So, because remember, when you're doing an asynchronous action, you can sometimes it can go successful, it can fail, loads of things can happen because of that network call, right? Asynchronous can also mean if there's a time delay. So let's say you want to do, it takes like 5 minutes for something to calculate after you click a button. That's asynchronous because it's not immediately you don't immediately see a synchronized result, which is why we call it an asynchronous action. Anything with a delay, think of it as asynchronous. So Redux Thunk and Redux Saga are things to look into for that. Just going to take a few questions and then we're going to wrap up today's session.
Sonny?
Yep.
So could you use like Firebase or MongoDB with Redux? Like, I mean, for the counter right here. So like whenever, even if you do reload, the amount would be saved. Like you could retrieve the most recent amount that was.
Yeah. So good question. Remember, so if you're using something like Firestore, I wouldn't even say, I would maybe just say directly map to the database, because Firestore makes it so easy to go ahead and do that. And they account for offline, which means that if you was to go offline, change some stuff, and then you got an internet connection again, it goes ahead and syncs everything. So I wouldn't even bother enhancing it. But to answer your question, I'm going to quickly share my screen and show you that there are libraries like this. You can do Redux, Firebase, and here you can see React, Redux, Firebase, React bindings for Firebase. So there's loads of libraries. This one has a decent number of stars. So here you can pretty much see how you can use it. You can see like how they've implemented it. And basically what this will do is, you see like where we had the reducer stuff, right? You pretty much have a Firebase reducer. And then what that does is you have this hook here inside of your functional component. So imagine this is our component. Say const Firebase equals use Firebase, and then here you can pretty much push things into like the Firebase collection, so to do, and you can do things like that. Now, am I a fan of this? Sometimes I've used it, but I found it can also make things kind of overcomplicated. So I've kind of like
We could just we could just add the Firebase object to the Redux state and it will still work.
Yeah,
But
as in you could do it that way.
yeah, but there's no reason to do that.
I mean, no, I wouldn't say there's no reason, because it could integrate nicely. I mean, just because the setup is difficult, yes, and I'm against it because I see the simplicity of just doing it directly. But they do give you things like is loaded, is empty, which help you out, because, for example, is loaded is going to help you have like a piece of state, not a piece of state, but it's going to allow you to basically go ahead and have like some kind of loading, right? So like imagine like if it takes a second for that asynchronous action, you can have a little spinner loading or something like that, right? So you could do that, which is kind of cool. But there's many different things you can use. Like even here, React Redux. Oh, this is pretty cool. So this is actually an official looking React Redux Firebase. And look, you see this? This is pretty cool. So I'd recommend maybe go have a check of this. Firestore. I'll drop this in the chat now, guys. Check this out.
So Sonny,
there you go. I just dropped it in the chat. Yep.
Yeah.
What was that, dude?
Yeah, Sonny. So isn't this just like is like a mini query for those for the state that is currently running?
Isn't this like what was that?
Like a query language. Like you can literally go through the data and
no. So guys, try not to like. Honestly, like what we tend to do naturally as developers. Thank you so much, Pedro. And I think we can definitely advance more in Redux next time. Maybe like some kind of example of like an old school Redux app and that kind of thing would be cool. Yeah, so try to not overlap principles. So in coding, to be a good developer, you get really good at kind of keeping things simple, right? Because like what we tend to do is we naturally really overcomplicate and or like naturally be like, I've heard of this principle, is this part of this, and is this part of this, and is this where we like do like data mining and things like that. You know, everyone kind of like overlaps principles and stuff like that. Keep it so simple, and just remember all Redux is doing is managing state within an app. That's it. That's literally all it does, right? Then you can plug in things on top like Redux Offline, Redux Persist, Redux Saga, all that sort of stuff. It all just plugs in on top, right?
Yeah, building in functionalities on top of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Thanks.
Right. No worries, dude.
Sonny, I had a question.
Yeah.
Sonny?
Yep.
I had a question.
Okay.
In context API, we have created separate state provider file and reducer files for login, basket, something like that. Is that creating separate data layers, or we are using them in the same data layer?
Say that again. Sorry.
Instead, in context API, we have created files state provider for different purposes, for login, for basket, something like that. Is that creating different data layers or using in the same data layer?
So in this case, what I was doing was I created two slices of state. One I created for, don't ignore the basket option. That was just me demoing something. But in this case, we had, let's go to our store. Here we had a counter slice and a user slice, right? Now, imagine if I had a basket inside of my app, I would probably create a basket slice, and then I'd have a basket reducer to listen and manipulate the app based on that stuff. Now, what I would say is it's like, for example, I would have a basket and a basket reducer, and then I would only use Firebase when at the point in which I actually process the order, right? So like when I actually push the order into the user sort of like, I actually sort of handle the payment and stuff like that, then I would go ahead and use Firebase and say like, hey, like, or if you really want to get your app super like sort of souped up, I guess, you're going to have like their basket in Firebase, so it's always kind of there. So I guess if they come back to the website, they've still got their basket. You can do that. But the main thing is, right, is try and keep your store sliced up into slices which make sense, right? Like have a basket slice for the purpose, and that's the only purpose of that basket size to basically manipulate the basket, which means that you actually reduce the complexity a massive amount by doing that, right? Also, I see loads of questions. Yep.
Same database.
Sorry?
Same basket slice in the same data. Same data layer.
Yeah. No. So remember, you have like you have this global store, and it's sliced up into different slices. You have like the user, the counter, the basket, right? That sort of stuff. That's all you need to sort of think of it from. Also, guys, please mute your mics if you're not talking. Yeah.
Thanks, Sonny.
Yeah. No worries, dude. I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to wrap up.
Sonny. Before you say that we should get familiar with the unfamiliar, I'm just getting familiar with the state props.
Yep.
How do you propose that we get familiar with the unfamiliar?
Yeah, so good question. And I think a lot of people would benefit from this answer. So my answer to this would be, remember, everyone is always going to be at different points, right? They're always going to be at, like, some of us are going to be more ahead of others and things like that. Now, what I would say is if you are like new to React, if you're new to sort of like, and you're not completely familiar with it, focus on the fundamentals, focus on like building your first component, focus on getting that thing to load on the screen. But then move on to state and props. State and props are going to be the most important fundamentals. If you don't know state and props, everything else is not going to make sense. Okay. Everything is. Are you pinned to the screen, dude? Oh, right. Sorry. Oh my God. Has it been pinned the entire time?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Like on the chat. Am I teaching?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Don was like, "Oh damn, did Sonny pin me?"
Teaching Sony now.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. I honestly, on my screen, I don't see that. If that ever happens,
Sonny,
yeah.
So Sonny, if we had to rebuild Amazon clone, can we do it with the Redux the way you demonstrated?
For sure, yeah. In fact, when I create the module, I'm working like I'm working on the React Basics modules now for you guys. So that will be dropping inside the course. So that will help all of you guys out from learning the fundamentals and stuff like that. Really trying hard to work on that and film it and do everything to get that out to you guys. And then I'm gonna basically be enhancing things like the builds that we have. So imagine we have the Hulu build. We have the.
Sonny.
Sorry, guys. Just yeah.
So I muted all.
Yeah. Joe just comes in with that slap. Yeah, so what I would say is, guys, and then I'm going to be bringing like things like the Hulu clone, but like upgraded version with Redux, with other functionalities and stuff like that. So that way you guys can take it to that next level, practice it with stuff like that. Also, thank you, Shrika, for the kind words. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
So Sonny, when we approach any project that involves Redux, so you think like when you someone like people who are involved in developing, like the developers, they do like the whole wireframe to the individual components level, how they will interact, and then they kind of divvy it out. Is that the way like a major project would go about in implementation wise?
So it depends. Like put it this way: when I was in a startup company, you basically have the way it works in a professional environment is you usually have someone called a product owner, right? Or like a product manager or a product owner is what you is typically.
Stakeholder, right? Basically.
Yeah, so try and think of it as stakeholder, but product owner is just literally like a manager, right? Like it's literally like you have scrum teams typically if you're doing like an agile sort of working environment.
Right.
So you have like a team of like, I don't know, maybe 4 of you developers. You have like a product owner who sits on top of it that kind of manages. And then you have like a designer maybe in that group. Now, the way it works is the product owner pretty much goes ahead and goes to like the stakeholders and stuff like that and says like, hey guys, what features do we want on the app? And then the stakeholders are going to be like, all right, everyone's asking for the chat functionality to finally be built out, and everyone's asking for Google login, right? So between the 4 developers, then you basically in a 2-week sprint, you would basically the product owner would say, all right, here's the user stories. Like here, the users want to be able to log in with Google. The users want to be able to have chat functionality. Then you would basically go ahead and your designer would provide a design. Maybe they'll provide like some designs for that, and then basically. There's no set way, right? So put it this way, whenever I had to do like a login thing, if I got stuck and I was kind of like, okay, I have a way that I think might work, but I'm going to need some help on understanding the way things are currently built. Because remember, you're going into an environment which has already been built in most cases, right? So what I would say on that front is, in most cases, I found myself kind of sitting with a bunch of other developers on a whiteboard and kind of just saying like, hey guys, do you mind just running me through like the current architecture? And then pretty much I have a solution that I'm going to propose to you guys. And we kind of like literally just draw it out. And he's like, okay, so currently we have 3 slices of state, which all basically are responsible for this. And I'll be like, okay, maybe we could use this part and this part as our data for this functionality. And you see, like you kind of just literally just kind of brainstorm it.
So you're saying basically try and reuse whatever is there first, rather than reinventing the wheel.
It's not, yeah, honestly, it'll be a case of like, it's not even reusing, it's your solution in most cases won't be like this where you have a fresh canvas, right? It's going to be like, you're going to have to integrate a solution into an existing software, right?
Sort of like a retrofit or something.
Yeah, it's like you got a retrofit. And in most cases, like a good developer, when I really sort of like started to shine in my sort of like career early on is when I kind of went from junior upward really quick is when I sort of like, I wasn't just kind of saying like, okay, this is what we need to change. So this is basically what I'm only going to do my job and I'm going to leave, right? I would basically start implementing things like, right, okay, I'm going to implement this feature. And also I touched 4 files. Each of those files were class-based components. I just changed all of them to functional components. And also we were doing some bad practices here, and here. And I know about these practices because I follow this newsletter and this is like the most up-to-date standards. So I think we should be using this. Whilst I was at it, I changed a few bits and bobs here. And then they're like, holy shit, like, what the fuck? Like, and then when you ask for a pay rise at that point, they don't really care. They're just like, okay, I mean, we're not going to lose you. Like, so do you see what I mean? Like, over deliver, right? Over deliver. And then when it comes to like asking about salary and this and that, then there's kind of like, we don't want to lose this guy because this girl, because it's just literally a case of like, you're just going above and beyond and you're just over delivering. Yeah. And don't ever feel like there's no silly questions. There's no such thing as being like, don't be reserved. Like literally like, dive in, offer to implement things which you have no idea how to build, because you put yourself in a position where you don't know how to build it. Because I promise you, if there's money behind it and you're getting paid, you're going to find out how to build it. You're going to pull on the resources. That stress is a good stress. It's a scary place, but it's the reason why I'm the developer I am today, because I literally just threw myself head first into the deep end to the point where I had no idea how to build half the stuff. And then you literally like, I was literally going to other offices in the building where I knew the other startup companies were. And I was like, hey, have you worked on React Native? And then let me go ahead and read. Yeah. I was literally walking into other offices in the building and I would literally ask them like, hey, is anyone in here coding in React Native? And I would literally find someone and then would pretty much go ahead and break it down. And they'll be like, yeah, actually, that's the reason why you're having that problem. And it forces you to really go outside your comfort zone to solve a problem. So that's my advice on that front. Yeah.
Cool.
Keep an open mindset as well, guys. Yeah.
And when Joe is talking about the distribution of a work, when you are working in a team, for example, if you're starting a fresh new project, then how you approach, how you divide your work into the team. And I'm talking about the coding perspective so that nobody should be able to step on others' work.
So, okay,
what
so
tools do you use?
So the main things is just the main way to sort of overcome that is learn GitHub, learn how to make like pull requests, learn how to sort of get involved in that side of things. Naz is actually pretty good at, I mean, he organized some kind of like a coding competition where everyone was pushing code in teams. That was a cool thing. We can do more of that if that helps out. But what I would say is GitHub is going to be essential in understanding understanding how teams work together. And also it's going to be, thank you so much, Arsing. It's going to be very, very important in terms of you, because trust me, once you know how to use GitHub, you very quickly answer the questions like how do many people work on code together. It pretty much goes ahead and it answers a lot of those questions. Right now, you very rarely are you going to be in a position. I have been in the position 2 or 3 times where we're starting a new product, right? Or I've been in part of a team and they want to start a new app or something. In which case, like, you do have a lot of opinionated battles because developers are heavily opinionated. It's like, no, I want to use this and I want to use that. And I had a huge debate with a senior developer when I was junior about why we should use TypeScript instead of something called Flow. And you would think that the senior developer would win, but I pretty much like, yeah, we ended up using TypeScript because I was like, no, but like, this is the reason why we should use it. And went back and forth for ages. And it was it actually got really heavy debate between the two of us. And then we literally ended up having loads of back and forth. But the point is that it doesn't matter. Like you just overcome those problems and never feel like just because you're junior, you can't say something to a senior developer, because in the end of the day, like it's trust me when I say I've worked with junior developers who have blown my mind in terms of how smart and quick learners they are and things like that. So never sort of take your like lack of experience as a sort of hit or I can't do that because I haven't really coded in that before. Just always assume like, but always keep an open mind. So it's a balance between the two.
And the other question is because when I used to work in a financial client, when I work with a financial client, they don't allow to use a GitHub. So what is your recommendation to use?
They didn't.
They don't allow. They don't allow. No, they don't want even to go to the Firebase or any external websites to grab anything. They have their own databases. They have their own local environment. So what tool do you think will be useful?
They probably, I mean, so they had no form of source control.
Yes, not like a GitHub. GitHub is we used, we can use it in other companies, but when you're working for a financial client, they don't allow to use any external resources because of the security.
Dude, I'd say fuck that company. I'm telling you.
At least they should have a Word document.
No, but there is a GitHub Enterprise Edition, right? I mean, you can. Yeah. I know financial clients that like the insurance companies and all, they still use GitHub, but it's more within their DMZ kind of. It's an enterprise version where only people within the organization can interact, not like any Tom, Dick, and Harry from outside.
Yeah,
there is a GitLab, and GitLab is for internal use where it's not external.
Yeah, and to be honest, like I know I made a joke, but the truth is there's always a way of doing it securely. Even GitHub. Remember, guys, GitHub is literally where
public or private, right?
Just make it private.
Guys,
private,
it's where
exactly.
make it private. It's literally where billion-dollar companies host their code. Like no joke, billion-dollar companies host their code on GitHub, GitLabs. Like if security was a concern, then you'd
they would have been bankrupt by now.
Yeah, then everyone, all of these billion-dollar companies would be hacked by now. Like, I mean, most of them are, but the truth is, like, it's the best you're gonna get is on that kind of thing. But if they do have,
I was not allowed to use even a Gmail or any external application outside. the scope of the companies.
I mean,
especially in financial.
I hope you're still not with the client.
It's, I mean, you do get cases where people are extreme. You do definitely get cases where people are very extreme with security. I mean, in the end of the day, if you're getting paid and that's what they want, I mean, I would go with it. I mean, but to be fair, if you're working somewhere for a long period of time and they're not using any source control, I don't think it's a good place that you're gonna. I mean, the chances are they're probably not following other standards or other practices. Were they literally like copying and pasting code, or like did they have like a USB
Yeah,
that
well, I would imagine too. How the hell do you maintain source?
Yeah, because the reason why GitHub's really good, and so think of it this way, because GitHub is essentially a source controller, which means that, say, for example, every single person on here had a feature that they wanted to work on, right? On an app that we're all going to build together. Yeah. Now what can happen is we can all make like a branch and we can all work on a separate branch and then we could all come together.
And then we'll merge it.
Yeah. And then we can like merge it together and things like that. Now, the bit where GitHub really shines is when you have like, say, for example, me and Priyanshu both coded the header, right? And we were like, oh shit, like I didn't realize Priyanshu added that icon, I added this one. You can
I'm coding with you. Oof.
Yeah, and then exactly, you have something called a like a clash, right? Or like a collision or something like that. And and a conflict it's called. And then GitHub and other sort of clients allow you to do something called conflict resolution, where it shows both code. Once I did, it shows both pieces of code, and you can pretty much very, very nicely choose which lines to keep, which lines to remove, and then you resolve the conflict and merge, right? So
Merge
that's
together.
yeah. So that's how you do it. So okay, what were you going to ask, Priyanshu?
No, I was just gonna tell one thing that there's an amazing video by Naz on the live stream. So
yeah.
Yeah,
he
Sonny,
has a
on that
recorded
resolving
video.
conflicts, in PHP Storm, you have a way to resolve conflicts from the editor. Do you have the same in Visual Studio Code? Like,
Yeah.
can you see the branches?
Yeah, it's a beautiful way of doing it. Yeah, you can really do it nicely. And in fact, what we'll do one day is I'll purposely kind of set up a scenario where we can sort of have a collision and then we can do it together and we can kind of overcome it. I think a whole session on GitHub might be pretty cool.
Yeah,
definitely. Naz, he has.
Yeah, Naz already has one.
He put.
Okay.
He's done a video. It's in the live calls from Naz about what is Git.
It's very, very good.
Oh, dope. Yeah,
And
if
it
you
goes
guys don't mind dropping the Slack
that's
channel.
exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah, if you guys don't mind, drop that in the Slack channel and let everyone know. That will help everyone out. Yeah. Awesome.
Doing it right now.
Nice.
Sonny, I had one question regarding React Native.
Okay, this will be the last question, guys.
Yeah. So suppose now, like we have an app which is on older version of React Native, and we had used some libraries.
Yeah.
And now, as due to iOS 14, it's been released. So when we code it, so many of the libraries has been depreciated. So what we should do, like we should look out for some new resource or just stick to the old version or something like that?
1 second. Just give me sorry, dude. Give me 1 second, yeah? And then I will get back to you. I just needed the link quickly. Okay. Do you mind just repeat that one more time? So React Native,
we have used some libraries for some gesture controls.
Okay.
So now for iOS 14, now when we compile it, it gives us like these libraries has been depreciated, like they are not been taken forward, like they have not been updated.
Yeah.
So most probably it gives some errors or some gives errors while publishing it.
Yeah.
So what we should do? We should look for a replacement or stick to the old version.
So this is something which kind of does become a bit of a tricky situation. So whenever you have any kind of whenever you're handling upgrades, right? Upgrades can cause breaks. They can cause things like they can break things. They can kind of mess things up. You need to be careful. What you need to look for is a minor upgrade versus a major upgrade. Now, a major upgrade is like, for example, say we had version 2.3.5 of React, right? Now, if it went from 2.3.5 to 2.3.6, doesn't really matter, right? That's not considered a breaking change, right? That's considered a minor change. I think even if it went from 2.3 to 2.4, you can actually get away with a lot, right? But the minute you go to a major change, right? So you have things like you have a major, a minor, and then you have like a smaller one. I can't remember what it's called, but you have like different
Patch.
a
It's
patch.
called
That's it.
patch.
Yeah, nice. Thank you, Anand. Yeah, so you have major, minor, patch, right? If it's a patch, really won't affect much. If it's a minor, chances are it won't affect much. If it's a major, it has breaking changes, right? So a major, if you go from version 3 to version 4, then you have to, like, I would recommend you read the documentation. You would thoroughly test your app. This is where automation testing comes in, because automation testing, if you set it up properly, so usually you have a QA team, right? Here's a top tip, guys. If you can actually go ahead and get really good at automation, you can save a company so much money on QA, right? Because you can build automations which basically are much quicker than QA. They run every single time code is pushed. Now imagine if you can think of it this way: if you can go ahead and save a company, let's just say a QA of two employees, right? And let's say they were paying them employees like 30K or 25K or something each, right? Now, if you ask for a bonus or like a boost in your salary of 15K because now you're handling all the automations, or 20K, they're going to be like, well, we actually saved money on 2 employees and he's actually doing a better job at some point, like as in, and he's covering all the stuff. And like, I'm not saying it's that easy, but the point is that you can do that. Like there's power to do that if you get good at that. But the main thing to look at is, the major changes. So you always want to read the documentation of major changes. Also, whenever you do dependency upgrades, be careful because things can break. And I've been in situations where you have to figure out what broke, and it is a nightmare. I'm not going to lie to you. It can become really like a headache. And I've been in situations where I've spent like an entire week trying to debug something because something got upgraded, and then it can get very messy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awani, last question. Awani, because you messaged, I think it was somebody messaged in the chat, so that'll be the last one, and then we're gonna wrap up there, guys.
I wanted to ask about Firebase. I mean, you said like Firebase actually make things easy for us, and we can use it for like hosting our application.
Yep.
Right. So, what if like the client we are working for doesn't use Firebase, or he or she like client has some his own hosting thing. So what's the solution for that? Like that time
Yeah.
we can't use Firebase.
So, very good question. And the truth is, wow, thank you. Well, firstly, thank you so much, Andre. He says this lesson alone was worth more than 3 years of computer science college. Thank you so much, dude. I love
It
that.
is, man.
Thank you so much, dude. I really appreciate that. So Awani, to answer your question, also, whose mic is that?
I just want onion
Joe comes in.
Joe
with
coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. I unmuted Giovanni. So basically, the way what you want to do is in most cases, you'll go into a company, they probably won't have Firebase. That's the reality of it. They're gonna have either Azure or like some kind of AWS or like some kind of like cloud infrastructure or something, like some implementation, because it saves them money in a big scale. So you have to be prepared to be flexible around that stuff. Right now, what I would say is it depends on what position you're going in for. So you could literally be you could be a front end developer. So you could pretty much be a front end, and you don't have to worry about the back end as much. The back end team will pretty much go ahead and deliver the sort of the response and that sort of stuff to you, and you pretty much just render it on the front. Full stack developer is a skill I would recommend you do pick up if possible, because it is going to help you in the long run. Especially if you want to kind of branch off and do your own thing at some point, or you want to freelance or do something. It kind of gives you the whole full focused sort of skill set to go ahead and focus on that. Now, I think I've went off track, but what was the actual question? It was like, how do we overcome that? Was it?
Yeah, if you are not using Firebase, then what's the solution? I mean, my use case is I need to make one website. It's a social media website for one NGO.
Yeah.
And it's like so like they won't be using Firebase at all.
Yeah. So all this stuff kind of comes under DevOps, which means that like if they've implemented it with like Azure or they've done AWS, then you're going to have to figure out how you do that. And there's going to be people on the team that can help you. Or if you do have to do it, then you're going to have to like kind of learn the new stuff to do it. But I would the reason why we teach Firebase is because if you're doing for personal projects, I always go with Firebase. It's the easiest thing. If I have a freelancing project, Firebase, boom, done. Like, but if the reality is in a commercial environment, you probably won't be getting that. You definitely won't. Yes.
That freelancing project, I mean, so I can suggest them to use Firebase. Is it like, will it, I mean, thing is like it's in India and like they can't afford that much money. I mean, I'm doing volunteering there, and it's like the minimum amount they can be doing, like they will be able to do it. So
did you say don't use Firebase? Was that?
No, I think she said that it's for a non-government organization, and I think they have budget restrictions.
Yes.
So they can't afford. So I'm guessing it would be a good idea to use Firebase because it's free up to a certain point.
Yeah, I would actually say use Firebase. Yeah, completely.
No, but if the company has their own databases, then she has to go through a connectivity with the database and push the data there.
Yeah,
instead of a Firebase.
Even if they have
for
their own
authentication.
database, even if they have their own database, I guess they have the documentation to how to use it. Like they must have it.
You're gonna have you're either gonna have a developer who's gonna be able to help you out. If you don't, and they just have a database, then if it's a SQL database, you're gonna have to pick up some SQL and pretty much learn how to like kind of do that.
It will be like I mean, it's like a completely new thing, just like Instagram and all. So the idea is like they want like all the NGO to talk with each other. Like they want one social media website for all the NGO working around all over the India, and they're not getting any fund from government. So it's like new thing for them, and they want like through that website they want to earn some money, so they don't have any database, nothing yet.
I would say go with Firebase. Yeah, the reason being is because, and if they kind of question you on it, I would say, look, if the idea hasn't been tested, and this kind of comes from a business perspective as well, because a lesson is like good software. I worked in a lot of startups, and the ones that succeed are the ones that do iterative builds, which means that like they do small incremental builds, which means that like if they have a new product, like you're saying, they want to get all the NGOs talking to each other, right? Build the simplest product to test the idea, right? And I would actually even pitch that across to them and say, like, look, Firebase is going to allow us to power the entire thing, have real-time functionality. We barely have to do much to get the entire chat functionality working. If they want to send pictures across to each other, Firebase storage will support it. We can host the app. We can do rollbacks. We can deploy it. Everything is supported by Firebase out of the box. Now, even language support is supported out of the box with the Firebase extensions. It will literally translate it to a bunch of different languages in a like literally just click a button and it does it all. So I would recommend pitching that across. It will also
do a proof of concept, right?
Yeah, literally just show them proof. And my best advice here would be like, just like Joe said, if they kind of say to you like, hey, but why should we do that? I would literally go and build it. And be like, I would build a very simple clone of it and be like, look, this is it. Like, it didn't take me long to do it. And
upload in on Instagram, you have uploaded in YouTube, on YouTube. Instagram.
Yeah, there is one on Instagram. Yeah, so we actually cloned Instagram already. So you can pretty much check that. And also Facebook we did. It's crazy now that we say it.
That was the first that I did.
Yeah.
I put it with you, but I did not finish it. Instagram clone.
I want to see you finish that, dude. That's it.
I will.
Nice.
Sunny, I have this question, Sunny. You were saying like we can use Firebase, right? Like, but Firebase doesn't have like, will it have like limitations on it, memory limitations? Like, let's say NGO.
Yeah, so I mean, remember that everything will have a limitation on, right? Like, as in, nothing is free. Like, as in, Firebase is actually considerably free for a lot of it, so you get a huge amount of stuff for free. But remember, guys, like all this stuff, like rather, like honestly, this is not like a dig to questions or anything, but like whenever it comes to a pricing question or something like that, just type in Firebase pricing or like literally AWS pricing and do a comparison of the two. Now, Firebase is literally free for so much, like as in like I've never hit a pricing plan on Firebase until it's completely needed. But I would say that you can just pretty much, my opinion would be that proof of concept is more important than a bit of differences in pounds here and there.
Right.
Yeah. With
I
that
believe
said,
for NGO,
yeah,
Firebase is you have to hardly pay anything for NGOs, I believe.
Yeah.
Just inquire about that.
Exactly.
No,
So,
but I would suggest Avani to keep in front, like in the to client, that there will be a price for specific data. So,
yeah, but remember, like any database is going to cost. Nothing is free, right? Like it's more about, can you prove that it's valuable? Remember, and this is what we talk about on coaching
Like,
calls and everything before.
whatever will be like least expensive. I mean, like in compare, like when we compare, like.
But guys, remember, like what I'm trying to say here is that like that you need to remember in terms of like we're considering things like, yes, it could be like when you hit 1 million messages, it's probably going to be a couple of pounds, like, which is still pennies. Like, is it? I know it's like, it may sound like a lot, but like it's nothing compared to like, yeah. And yes, AWS, you could probably get a bigger scale, but the implementation is going to be harder. The developer cost will actually be huge compared to if you just quickly build the thing on Firebase. Like, so that's why if
you are even reaching 1 million messages, you might already have the budget to do that. I guess, like.
Yeah, of course. Then if they are reaching there, then of course.
Yeah, exactly. So you would have proved the concept. Yeah, guys, I'm gonna wrap up.
One question.
I'm gonna wrap up here, but
Okay.
yeah, just purely because otherwise it's gonna keep on going. So Priyanshi,
Yeah.
just send me a message and I can answer that when I get a chance. But I
Okay.
hope you guys found it useful today.
It was amazing, Sonny. It was so
Yeah. It was
amazing.
perfect.
Damn, I learned so much.
Awesome. Like, I hope you guys enjoyed that and
Awesome, dude.
yeah.
I think I over enjoyed it.
Nice.
Didn't think
Such-
that
such
Redux
an
was
awesome
this
session.
simple.
Yeah.
Sonny, I want to say something to you.
What was that?
You guys are doing very, very hard work to provide the content in the form of YouTube and coaching calls. I think this course is more than a money when compared to your hard work. This course is priceless.
Thank you so
You are
much,
awesome.
dude.
Absolutely. There is no doubt about it.
I heard
Yeah, there is no doubt about it.
I want to sing for you. I thought, oh, now he's gonna be singing.
Thank you so much, guys. No, I really, really appreciate that. And even my friend just came in the YouTube chat, Jay. He goes, he just had his birthday, lol. And thank you so much, guys, for turning up and showing up as always. And for everyone on YouTube, if you enjoyed it, smash the thumbs up button. And yeah, as always, guys, I'll see you next week. And keep on crushing, and make sure you all give the Redux template a try, right? So create React app -- template Redux, and yeah, and an awesome session. And I will see you all next week. Right?
Thanks, Sonny.
Peace, guys.
Cheers, Sonny.
Nice.
Bye-bye.
Peace, guys.
Thank
See you later, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, you.
Bro, what happened?